pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just one announcement this morning. A closed session was held October 2nd, 2007, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Coburn versus County of Calaveras Superior Court case number CV 31237, resulting in no action taken. It's time to move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. Board members?
3 and 7.
Item number 4, please.
Any others? Okay, items number 3, number 4, and number 7 have been removed from the consent agenda. Is there a motion for the remainder?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on the 5-0. We'll move on to item number 3, a minute order authorizing partial refund to claim for refund of property taxes submitted by Performing Animal Welfare Society on April 24, 2007, and authorizing assessor to make rule corrections to the year 2000 in connection therewith.
I'd like to amend the minute order to include the years 2000, 2001, 2002.
I'll second the motion, the amended motion.
Okay. Did you get that, Carol?
Resolution.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Marita made the motion. Tom Tryon second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on at 5-0. We'll move on to item number 4, resolution accepting the canvass of the Central Fire and Rescue Protection District special election held on September 25th, 2007.
Yes, I pulled this just to highlight a couple of things that are just about record-breaking, and I thought important to note. And, the turnout for the special election was nearly 52%. It was the only thing on the ballot, which is pretty unusual. Secondly, the support for the district was at 77%, a little over 77%, on a tax measure. And I think it's important to note how that was done. We keep on talking about revenues and elections, but this issue was taken to a number of community meetings. There was a citizens group that formed, which was broad-based and brought the issue before the district as a whole. People who disagreed with us had an opportunity, a good opportunity to hold public debate. And it was very clear in the end what was at stake, what was being voted on. And despite some of the complexities of GAN limits and other things, this district, this is the Central Fire District, voted 77% for. This is the third district now in the last 2 years in District 2 that has supported their fire department's efforts to fund themselves adequately and staff on a full-time basis. And I think that methodology is clear. When citizens have an opportunity to take a look at exactly what's at stake, and when they're involved in the process of making that decision in an election process, the outcomes are quite often surprising, and in this case, record-breaking. I don't believe there's been a 77% in this county for a revenue matter, and I thought it was worth noting.
I agree. And so
I therefore move the acceptance of.
I second the motion.
Discussion?
No public comment, sir?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
With all these percentages, it would be interesting to know what Central Calaveras Fire's percentage of registered voters were property owners or not property owners, and it would also be interesting to find out what percentage of parcels were absentee owner parcels that had no ability to vote. That would be the interesting part, not just the record-breaking, but the interesting part of the non-voter or people with non-vote unparticipation parcel owners. Thank you.
Welcome. This resolution has been, is there any other comment? Excuse me. Resolution's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0. We'll move along to item number 7. Rita?
Yes, I pulled this item, Sheriff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We brought this issue forward some time ago. Really, it kind of came to a head during the Patterson fire, and then during the floods we had about that time also, that we desperately needed some way to make emergency notifications to our citizens. And so through public health, Homeland Security, we selected and paid for this reverse 911 system as an emergency notification system. And I know there's been some debate lately about what we should or shouldn't use that system for. I absolutely believe that it should be 100% for emergency notification. It should absolutely not be used for any other purpose. I do not want the citizens of our county getting one of those messages and saying, oh, got another meeting, and hanging up before we tell them to pack their stuff and get the hell out. I just absolutely believe that we need to reserve this for an emergency notification system. And we want it to go through the Office of Emergency Services. And we also are trying to get it configured so it's all triggered through dispatch. The one nice thing about this is we can add on. If we need it, we can grab Tuolamee's lines, we can grab Amador's lines, we can grab San Joaquin County's lines to really start building on this thing. Because I think anybody that's been around the county for any length of time knows that some of these fires we have, it is critically important that we get people advised to be prepared or to get out. In the past, we've been trying to evacuate people or notify people to be evacuated, and we've actually had a couple of deputies' cars scorched because of fire. We want this system to be important, and for when people get the call, we want them to act appropriately.
Well, I pulled this item, one, because the funding for this was for emergencies, but supervisors have wanted to use this system to call community meetings, and I feel like, we need to work through that if supervisors want to use that, then or any other department wants to call a community meeting for whatever reason, that we should talk through this. And one, it seems like we shouldn't be using something that's funded for emergency purposes, so how would we fund it? And two, philosophically, for getting the funding, because I understand it's not necessarily expensive to do this, and I want to call a community meeting on Measure J.
Actually,
I want to do that, and then words for emergencies, I feel like we needed to talk through it because they're getting the same people are getting the phone calls for emergencies as for any community meeting I might call.
well, if the intent of this is to be able to contact anybody that's a resident of Calaveras County, I would love to use this system for Measure J, but there's commercial systems that are available to all of us. And I just, when public health they put the bulk of the money in, and then Homeland Security put almost the rest. I think the general fund put in about $2,100 or $2,700 out of $59,000, I think. But the intent was, the belief is that it's an emergency notification system. If the county wants to establish an informational system, I'd be glad to work on that.
Okay, but my question is not the money portion. And then the money portion, we could work through that. The intent is, if we are calling the residents in Ebbets Pass for community meetings, and then there is, like your opening comment, there's an emergency, which there has been in Ebbets Pass, then what? Do people just, is the first thing, don't hang up, this is an emergency? Because mine was, oh, there's a meeting at Independence Hall on Thursday at 6:30. I mean, part of this is this how we should be using a system, any system? And
I firmly believe if the people of this county get a call from Calaveras County, they shouldn't be, I mean, we have a congressman now that makes a lot of these calls, and the first couple, you know, I kind of jumped all over the phone trying to get to it. I just really think that if they get a call from Calaveras County, they should pay attention, and they should not get to the point where it's ignored like it's another message.
that's fine. It was very clear what you wrote. I just felt the board should have the discussion. So I kind of open it up to my colleagues because the Office of Emergency Services gave us the criteria, and that's different than my asking for the residents of Ebbets Pass to come to a meeting at Independence Hall. And should I be using that system? And then, of course, how I pay for it is another issue. So I throw it open to my colleagues before we vote on it.
Okay, Russ.
Okay, back in May, this was an item that we deliberated on, and I asked some specific questions about whether this system would be available for public notifications, and the answer was yes. That on the table that day was an expenditure of $34,000. Now, I'm hearing information this morning that apparently it was some other disbursement out of contingencies, but that's what we decided to do that day, was to advance $34,000 and some change out of contingencies to backfill this expenditure. So, when I heard that it was available for use, I made the motion and somebody seconded it, and we approved it. Now, let me ask, is it not true that $34,000 was taken out of contingencies to purchase this system?
Not to my knowledge. To my knowledge, the system was $57,618. $30,950 came out of public health.
But we reimbursed that.
$24,500 came out of Homeland Security. Jeannie could explain where the public health share came from, but I believe it was a grant that, quite frankly, I think the money was going to go away if it wasn't put into some kind of a notification communication system.
Okay. I hear your concerns that people are going to become desensitized if they get calls repeatedly from the county. And I mean, if that was the case, if all the notifications started off by saying, this is a call from the county, you conceivably could get that desensitized feeling. But Sheriff Downham, we have used this only about 4 times since May when we approved it, and in each and every instance we have. Well, let me back up one step. We got, as a board of supervisors, we got blasted by the residents of San Andreas for improper and inadequate notification of a town hall meeting, and there was some validity to that claim. So when immediately after that we had a meeting in Copperopolis, and so I was the first one to use this, and at the onset of the meeting I asked 80 people in the room, how many people here got the message yesterday, which incidentally it was specifically timed to be, it's dialed out when nobody is home, theoretically. I mean, it's between 12 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that 70 or 80% of these things go to voice message machines. Okay, so out of 80 people, 75% of them raised their hand and said, yes, I got the message. Okay, I said, okay, the next question is, how many of those people, was this the only method that you had available to you, or only notification method? And the same hands went back up. Now, I've had meetings in Copperopolis, 2 meetings, had a meeting in Valley Springs and another meeting in Rancho Calaveras. The same questions were asked. And the preponderance of the people that are attending these meetings are coming because of the voice, the telephone notification. You used it, I think.
I've never used it.
Oh, you didn't use it? Okay. But Supervisor Walensky used it all very effectively, and I don't think that, Marty, did you receive a call? Okay. All right.
Russ, I absolutely do not agree with you that this is a very effective way of communicating with people. What I'm saying is I would love to see every member of the board, every department head in this county have access to a system like this. There are information systems available. I just don't know that us using it for community meetings or non-emergency items really complies with Homeland Security wishes or public health wishes when they gave us the money to do this. And I just think something that should be going through our dispatch should be an emergency type notification.
I've got this is a brochure that touts the characteristics and the capabilities of this reverse 911 system. Communication enhancement modules, they list this, and they list a community information line. Now that's one of the capabilities of this system. It's a community information line that doesn't say anything about that this should be restricted to emergency notifications. I mean, I think that we're in a situation here we're going to have to agree to disagree on this, because the way I feel about it is that if this board advanced $34,000 out of contingencies, and I can show you it's minutes of the meeting where it says that $34,000 was advanced out of contingencies for the purpose of the motion that we made. If we're not going to be able to use the system, then I think that we need to get the money back into the general fund.
Good morning, Jeannie Boyce, Director of Health Services Agency. Just for a point of clarification, when the system was purchased, Public Health used the Bioterrorism Emergency Preparedness Grant funds that were allocated to communications that were going to go back to the state if they were not used. And at that time, there was some available Homeland Security funds that we then coupled together to purchase the system, as well as pay for the second and third year of system support and maintenance. There was some cost to Technology Services Department. Technology Services, Public Health fronted the cost of $2,168.75 for tech services, which was then reimbursed through contingencies through a resolution that was approved by the board in May. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the minutes that Supervisor Thomas you're referring to, and I think we ought to go back and look at that, because I'm not sure we've seen that. But I can tell you that out of the Bioterrorism Emergency Preparedness Funds, Public Health paid $30,950 of the total cost, which was $57,618.75. It was purchased with the intent that it was an emergency notification system. At that time, Russ is correct that there are other counties that use other modules to communicate with the public, and there are other modules available. The county did not purchase those at this time. So, and I really believe it's a board's decision in terms of how you wish to use the system. We certainly bought it with the intent that it was for emergency notifications. At that time, we had nothing to notify the public. If there was a fire, that's what we were really looking at, or floods, which has been our past experience, and felt that this was one way we could get notification out to the public.
Steve?
It seems to me we've got several different issues before us, and I don't want to mix and match them. We have the funding question and what we can appropriately use, what module we have. That's one question. The second one is the policy. What's the scope of use for this technology? And I think we all agree that this is great technology, and it gives us capabilities of communication far beyond anything that we've experienced. And this is a county that's been under some criticism for failure to communicate with the public over a wide range of issues. Second issue that seems to be important is who's on first, who's in charge of this. And I don't think there's a lot of controversy that the priority here is that this is an emergency first issue, so that it seems the proposal to put it in OES at least makes sense to me. But it's a question of under what policy and what scope. And finally, I guess we have another issue which has come up, which is how do you identify these calls? Because the public doesn't know what system you're using, what technology you're using. It knows what you say when you're on the line. So if there were different ways we would use this, I don't think the redundancy factor would get into a whole lot of trouble. When somebody says, this is the sheriff, this is an emergency pertaining to your home, get the heck out, or when the public health folks say there's a pandemic in your neighborhood, here's the things you ought to do, I'm pretty sure people are not going to push the erase button before hearing it out. I don't think there should ever be communication confusion. That is, if there's a generic, this is your county talking, that's a problem. And secondly, if we pretend it's an emergency, although some could argue it, that a planning meeting is of that nature, then I think we could begin to dilute the effect. But if we're clear in the way we communicate, I don't think having some kind of multiple use of a technology rather than purchasing a whole bunch of different ones, if we are legally capable or allowed to do this, I think it's an efficiency. And just for my one meeting that we involved, it was the Mintier meeting on the public. We had only one meeting for our entire district. We put out the robocalls a couple of days before. We had 220 people come. It was the same similar hand show that we had put out notices, and we'd put out in newspapers, and we did a lot of other things. But the way most people found out was through this technology. So I find it very useful, and would hope that we'd find a way that doesn't conflict. The sheriff's got a good point. If it does dilute the impact of emergency calls, that would be certainly not worth doing. But if we can find a mechanism, I would favor the policy, the overarching policy of being able to use this to enhance county communications in every way we can, subject to that whole question of dilution of emergency impact.
I can just speak to the public health portion of the funding that was used. We used it for emergency notification. That's how we justify the expenditure. And we always intended, public health is not communication experts. We're not communication experts. We essentially will always be part of the OES system if, in fact, there's an emergency. God forbid we have the pandemic. The OES will be activated. We'll be going through OES. And we will be the medical health branch of a larger countywide emergency system. The telecommunications part really falls into Howard Shop and Technology Services in terms of actually activating the system. And I think that's where the board may have some challenge in terms of you're wanting to expand the scope of the system, asking yourself at what point do you decide what's a political meeting, what's a public education meeting, what's an emergency notification? Do people become less interested in your message because you're using it all the time, and quite frankly they don't hear the difference between a sheriff or a meeting for Supervisor Walensky? I mean, that's really a board decision. And I think there are costs associated with that Howard can talk about that we never anticipated because we didn't buy the system with that purpose in mind. But I think that is a board decision.
Howard, do you have something to weigh in here with?
Just wanted to maybe clarify the issue in May. I was the one that brought that item to the board in a resolution. What the resolution is asking for is $4,482 to be moved from contingencies into a couple of places. One of them was $2,100 essentially to Jeannie's budget because she did front the money, and so what I was asking for is a reimbursement. Where the $30,000 probably came in was the amount that Jeannie's department had paid. That was the amount of their contribution for the system. So I was asking for a reimbursement for the overage, or essentially $4,000. That did come out of contingencies. Part of it went to Jeannie's budget, part of it went to tech services. So I'm thinking all those numbers are in the right place. I'm not sure how they actually appear in the minutes, but I know the item that was brought to the board and passed. The system was purchased with the intent of emergency notification in mind. When asked if it could be used, the answer is yes. It's a technology. Of course it can be used. I think the bigger question is, should it be used? And does it actually jeopardize any of the grant funding from public health and the sheriff's office? And I think that's, what we're asking for is a board decision on a policy when it should be used.
Well, let's get the one thing clear. Does it jeopardize the funding? Are there mechanisms that we could use to reimburse or purchase some part of the time? I hate to see technology that is this useful sitting idly for most of the year and maybe never being used. So far, I don't think we've had one emergency use, but we've had 4 uses to good end in public notices.
At a cost of about $300.
At the cost of about $300. So the question is, can that $300 be reimbursed to the departments or ultimately to the feds or whoever needs to be reimbursed for what portion is taken out for the actual use of it in non-emergency cases? I just want to make sure we're on sound legal footing as we do this, and I don't want to jeopardize funds.
I think that's one of the reasons we got this before you today, because when you're working with these kinds of funds, Homeland Security and the grant monies Jeannie's talking about, you never know where the firm ground's at. Homeland Security audits us constantly. And the expenditure we're sure is good for communications. But the audit uses, we have to take them out and show them stuff in fire trucks that we bought. It's to the point of being almost ludicrous. But at some point, they very well could determine it's an improper use of their stuff, and do they want $300 back? Do they want $23,000 back? I don't know. And when you're dealing with those kinds of federal funds, I think it's maybe that's why we're here trying to push a big piece of this decision off on you guys, because we don't know where the firm footing is on this fund.
Do we know how much, if let's say we were to buy one of these separate modules that attaches to this, what kind of dollars are we talking about? I hate to be redundant, and we're trying to be thrifty economically here, but let's see what the implications there are.
There are a few modules which you can purchase. I believe Supervisor Thomas was referring to a module called Community Bulletin Board, and that's actually a call-in feature.
Right.
So instead of us calling them, people call us. The other issue that really, I'd like to pass out this, if I may, to the board. One of my business analysts did essentially an analysis on the system and its original cost, where it came from, how it was allocated, etc. The other thing that's really not, that we really haven't touched on, is whether or not the Public Utilities Code permits us to do this. We've stayed away from the database called the MSAG database, which is AT&T's database from 911. We stayed away from that and used other databases for these community calls, which may explain some of the holes in notifications. But
can you explain what that database was?
the database we used was the elections database. It's essentially a database created from registered voters and the information on the registration cards that they submit.
So we didn't call anybody that didn't have they put their telephone number down on their voter registration.
True.
Right? Okay, thank you.
And that's why there are some long-distance calls in some of the meetings and some cell phone calls, et cetera, because whatever number they put down is the number we called. We intentionally stayed away from that 911 database because of the uncertainty with the Public Utilities Code. So I think another part of this decision really needs to be some time with County Council to analyze the whole process and whether or not we can use it for our intended purpose, I am familiar with some of the counties in other states that have an opt-in, where you actually register to receive notices, etc., the community bulletin board, and then some just put it out. So it's essentially something that the board really needs to take a look at. The modules, I don't remember if you put the pricing in here or not.
I'm going to make a recommendation.
The bulletin board is a $3,400 one-time fee plus an ongoing $360 a year maintenance. So if the board chose to do that, it would be approximately $3,400.
Thanks, Howard.
Can I ask you a couple of questions, Howard? This expenditure looks like from the invoicing and everything was in 2006, August of 2006. This became an item that got my attention in May of 2007. Had the system been used prior to May of 2007?
No.
As I recall, when I requested using it in Copperopolis, it took 3 days to learn how to use the system.
Yes. The calls to Copper were a wonderful training opportunity, yes.
I don't want to embarrass anybody, but that seems an oddity that you'd have an emergency notification system that would take 3 days to learn how to use it. Okay, and summarizing these expenditures, we've used it 4 times, but the only thing that you have this calls session cost evaluation. We have the calls to Copperopolis, Jenny Lynn, West Point. I was wrong. Those 3 calls, actually the user charges that the county was charged was $109.64. This.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, this presentation shows that there is a monthly reoccurring charge for the 12 lines that we use for this purpose. And I want to emphasize that those lines are up and running day after day, month after month, whether we use it or not, right?
They are.
Okay, so that part of the cost should be thrown out in my view. I mean, the cost of making those 3 calls was $109, and we notified, I'm going to guess, about 3,000 people for $109. And the net connected calls in Copperopolis was 930 out of 1,200. In my mind, it's really very clear. We have a reoccurring charge here of $7,783 for the maintenance charge annually. That comes out of the general fund. Is that correct?
The maintenance is actually prepaid. I believe that's one of the issues that my analyst put in there that shouldn't be in there. The maintenance is prepaid. When that subscription ends, then yes, there will be an ongoing maintenance.
Okay, so if we don't make a decision on this today, then at approximately a year and a half from now, we'll be faced with making a decision of whether we're going to continue to fund this maintenance charge out of the general fund for the purpose of making maybe only an emergency call. So, I don't know, Marita, you're the one that pulled this off. You have...
I have some comments also.
Go ahead, Tom.
There you go. Dennis, let me ask you, are there other jurisdictions, obviously there are other jurisdictions that have the reverse 911, and in those jurisdictions, who is generally responsible for administering the reverse 911 system? And in those jurisdictions, do they have, are they using that system for more than emergency situations?
Actually, Howard surveyed, I don't know how many counties. Some are using it strictly for emergencies. Some are using it for pretty much everything in the world. But I don't know specifically whether it's this 911 system. I don't know
reverse
how.
911. You better say reverse 911 or people think we're talking about the other system.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of money those counties use to purchase that system. I have no idea about that. And, in my mind, that's one of the big hang-ups, is the type of the money we use to purchase this system and specifically what we told those people it was going to be used for. There has been, to my knowledge, about $2,100 pushed into Howard's shop from the general fund. The maintenance, the $7,000 a year maintenance has all come out of Jeannie's funds. In a year and a half, we'll make a determination whether that will be an ongoing cost with Jeannie, with Homeland Security, whether we have to come back to this board. But at this point, there's $2,100 of general fund money.
Okay, well, I'll give my 2 cents worth on the issue then. And for starters, I don't think we should mix the emergency system with non-emergency calls. I think those two should be kept separate. I am for placing it under the sheriff's office with the emergency services group. I don't understand the debate over whether general fund monies were placed into the system or not. I mean, if it were all general fund money, I still don't think it would be wise to mix the emergency with non-emergency calls, and I don't see any problem with having some or a significant amount of general fund money in the, if there were, which in this case there is not, to have general fund money contribute to a reverse 911 emergency call system. I think that's clearly within the authority of county government, and it's something that on emergencies we had better be prepared, and we need to do. So I don't understand the argument about the source of funding as being a determinant as to the purity or clarity of the emergency systems we have in place in the county. And I guess I would just sort of end by saying I don't really know that the county, I'm not convinced that the county has an obligation to call everybody individually whenever we have a county meeting, that we would, that's just a meeting that's open to the public and has the appropriate notice procedures that we have historically used. I'm not so sure we aren't going to get in almost more problems with notification by people saying, well, I wasn't called, therefore, I wasn't there, and we want you to have the meeting again. I mean, we've gotten enough of that. So I'm not quite convinced, given the discussion, that the county has an obligation to individually call every citizen about a community meeting. So I think that that, in my mind, hasn't been established as being a particularly good idea at this point. So I am in favor of the consent agenda item as presented.
Thank you, Tom. I have comments too, but before I do, Marty, you had something you wanted to say?
I do. Marty Crane, listening
Sign
to
in too, Marty. Thank you.
I was going to do that. I forgot. That's how fast I forgot. I'm a survivor of the Pattison fire, and so due in part to many, many people that helped us be here today, including the scorched vehicle, which we were just in awe of. How is he going to see so many different neighborhoods and find them once you get there, because we live in the country and we have 5 doors, which one's he going to knock on? So a phone call would have been fabulous. And in the evening when I'm down for the count, I don't mind getting up if it's an emergency call. I'm glad to hear that what you were saying about the meeting notices going out before 2 o'clock. If this was ever to be used for that sort of thing, I think it should be a standing rule that it never happens after 2 o'clock, because a lot of our seniors are taking naps at 2 o'clock. They don't want to get up and answer the phone unless it's for an emergency. And then also, it occurs to me that in the meeting where you ask how many people got the phone call, I never received the phone call, and quite a few other people around me didn't either. And now I'm understanding that the database is not a database that includes everyone's phone number. It's only those that are registered to vote and have put their phone number on there, and remembered that when they changed their phone number, they changed it on their registration. That's an awful lot of ifs to take care of for something so important. So I'm just a little concerned that a lot of people are being left out of the notification mix for that. And then it also occurred to me that being that a lot of people are not in this database, I wonder if using it periodically for a town meeting notice might also be an exercise in fine-tuning the notification list. How many people did not get notified? Please leave your numbers so in case of emergency, we can add you to the list. It's just and maybe that would be something that Homeland would see as I lost the word, but an appropriate and well thought out way to enhance the effectiveness. And that's all I have to say on there.
Thank you, Marty. Do you have more to add, Howard? Are you getting up to leave or coming to the podium? Okay. Please.
Could Stephanie weigh in on this?
She can if she wants to.
We have the ability, since the system is a database-driven system, we have the ability to connect to a variety of data sources. In the event of an emergency, there is no question that we can use the entire reverse 911 data set and connect to that. That data is refreshed once a month by AT&T, and we input that in the system. So in the event that there is an emergency, that database, the database we use to notify for the public meetings goes away, and the MSAG database is the database we choose to use. Just wanted to make sure that.
So that database is updated each time there's an emergency?
The database that we receive from AT&T is updated every month by AT&T. It includes all of the listed and unlisted numbers of business, every number that AT&T has, and then also Volcano and Caltel submitted to AT&T as well. So we receive one data set every month from AT&T that includes, to the best of our knowledge, every telephone number in Calaveras County, with the exception of people that are only using cellular and that kind of stuff. But it's the best data set that we're going to get.
Thank you, Howard.
I'm just curious, so how does that explain those that didn't receive a call that have landlines? And I'm just wondering, and town meeting notices, is that a way to capture them?
Okay. Thank you, Marty. Stephanie, did you have something for us?
Good morning. Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. Regardless of what the board's decision is today relative to the use of this particular system, I'd like you to know how valuable it was for the public to receive these messages. They don't know where the call's coming from. To them, it's just another phone call on their message machine. There was overwhelming good response from the public at the meetings. They like it to continue. I think if you were to take a poll of the public, you'd find that they all felt it was worthwhile expenditure of county funding. If the board decides not to use this particular system, I think it would be prudent to take a look at purchasing another similar system. Maybe it would be redundant, but I think that we've established a way to restore some of our credibility with the public. We could figure out a way to create a database where people voluntarily give us their information, and that's used for distribution since it's not using the 911 database, so that we could encompass more people than just the registered voters at this time. But I would like to encourage the board to not suspend the practice of using a system such as this for public notifications. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment in regard to this issue? I have a few comments. I have to say that I agree with the sheriff, and I respectfully agree to disagree with Supervisor Thomas, and I do mean respectfully. Russ, I understand the usefulness of this system. My question for myself is the appropriateness of it. Those of us that are old enough to remember the Cold War remember that the federal government spent, I don't know, God knows how many millions of dollars on air raid sirens, and when those things went off, we didn't think there was a town meeting. If you listen to the radio today, they have the public warning system. It's the most irritating noise you can possibly imagine, but we do know that that's an emergency notification system. It is not a public service announcement. And so we have a history of segregating these type of messages. I would hate to see the uniqueness and necessity for emergency notification diluted with public service messages, and I agree with the concept that perhaps we should look into a similar system that would be an adequate notification system for community events, etc. The other issue, of course, is the one that the sheriff brought up, and this money, quite a bit of money, was used through the public health grant and the Office of Homeland Security for use against notification for bioterrorism. And until we really learn, and according to the sheriff, and dealing with the federal government, this is easy to believe, that's a moving target. It depends on whether the level of jeopardy is at what color, whether it's orange or red or gray or blue or what have you. They seem to change their criteria for the use of their funds to protect the public. So we would hate to, or I would hate to jeopardize future funding from any of these agencies because we have not used the system as we had for the purpose we had adopted it for. And I agree that public notification system of some sort would certainly be useful. I just don't believe that the reverse 911 system should be used for anything but emergency services synonymous with 911. So those are my thoughts. Rita, you had some more?
No, I want to make a proposal. I'd like to move this item as presented because it's for emergencies and how it was funded. Then separating that out, going back to some of the things that my colleagues have talked about, and some of the things that Howard mentioned, like the PUC, that we put a study session together. We look at protocol, communication etiquette, how we would fund it, because I agree, I don't think we should fund it through the two ways we've done it. If it's something that the board wants to fund, then we need to find a way to do it through general fund dollars or some other mechanism. And then we just bring it back to the board. I mean, the etiquette could be things like Jeannie Boyce mentioned, how you introduce the phone call, or the number of ones that any supervisor or department could do in a year, and set up a criteria similar to what Office of Emergency Services has set up in here. So, I mean, this isn't a rush item. It doesn't have to come back as an addendum, and it doesn't have to come back in 2 weeks, but we can put it on the to-do list for our CAO to come up with a funding mechanism and a protocol for the non-emergency calls, and let's see, and let's talk about it at that time and float it out.
I'll second the motion then to approve item 7 as presented.
You know, he reminds me of Tommy Taylor. He said, "Are you ready to take the vote, Marita?" when he thought I talked too long. So I moved the item. Tom made the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I want to make sure that with that resolution, we've passed it as it is, but does that also include
No.
the study session, or do we need to make another?
No, that's
Just
just
going to
a
come back
request.
later.
That's just a request.
Motion carries on a 4-1. Supervisor Thomas.
Okay, on a point of order, we have a meeting coming up in November. Do I have to go out and get another methodology for notifying the phone calls for that meeting? Or do I have to call Clay Hawkins and see if I can use his system?
Well, this clearly,
This
resolution.
does not, this is as presented with no modifications. If you're wanting to do something, I guess I'd recommend that you
But
talk to the CAO and the chair.
The resolution says that the decision about what announcements are going to be made would be determined by the Office of Emergency Services.
With this criteria. With the criteria. Is that my understanding, Dennis? And unless it meets that criteria. So if you want to make a proposal, Russ, to the board before we have a chance to follow up.
I'll just fund it out of my local funds. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay. We'll move along to item number 8, which is public comment, 5 minutes per person, 15 minutes per topic on any topic that is not on today's agenda. Members of the public?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Nikki Stevens, and I'm here this morning on behalf of Mark Twain St. Joseph's Hospital. And I've just come to personally invite each and every one of you, and you all as well, to our 9th annual Harvest and Health Fitness Festival this Saturday at the hospital. It's from 7 to noon. I am the event coordinator. I do have some wonderful pamphlets that were inserted in our local newspaper this weekend. If anyone has any questions about the event, I would be happy to answer anything that you have at this time. Otherwise, I will step out and let you conclude with your much more important items.
So, Nikki, where do folks actually go and what do they do or get? It's like...
The festival itself will be held on the campus here at the hospital, and I have to tell you before I forget that I have a lot of county agencies that are attending this year, participating as representatives of public health, and I have behavioral health. I have probably 6 or 7 different agencies, and normally we do have quite a few from the county sector as well, but it seems like this year I have a little bit more, and the participation excitement level seems to be there more because we have quite a large venue of many different aspects that I've incorporated for everyone. I'm really trying to include the family. We want to make this a family event as well. I have a lot of children activities that I've never been able to do in the past. We have blood analysis screening. We have the flu shots, the pneumo shots. We have bone density, Dr. Craig Levitt will be doing. We have many physicians that will be on site. We have a lot of free, good information from many, many different agencies within our own sector and those on the outside as well.
And the charge to the public?
Oh, it's free. Well, the blood analysis is $25. The flu shots and the pneumo shots are either you present with a Medicare card or it's $30 for the pneumo shot and $25 for the flu shot. But let me back up a little bit on that. We actually will do them for free, donations accepted. So, a lot of people don't have $25 or $30, and that's fine. We'll take care of you, absolutely.
That's a recommended donation.
Yes, but unfortunately the blood analysis is actually a $300 test, and we are able to offer it at $25, so we can't offer that for free. We'd love to, but we can't at this time.
And the bone density?
The bone density is done by Dr. Craig Levitt, and that, I believe, is $10.
Great.
Nikki, it's great to see the hospital out there doing more community outreach and re-engaging. Delight to have you before the board today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time very much.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
You guys have to leave during these?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Ben.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Supervisors. A couple of things. First of all,
Identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Tim McSorley with the Council of Governments. I'd like to welcome back Mr. Harrington. I know he's probably pretty busy, haven't had an opportunity to sit down and chat with him, but look forward to that sometime in the near future. A couple of really exciting things happening with the Council of Governments. We recently were notified that we are awarded a community-based transportation planning grant in the amount of $80,000. This grant is similar to the one that we received for work up in Arnold. It has essentially 6 elements. It develops more efficient land use patterns to ensure available housing and meeting demands of increased population, reduces dependence on single-occupant vehicles, fosters neighborhood project design to enable more walking and biking for healthier communities, minimizes impacts on valuable habitat and productive farmland, increases resource use efficiency, including energy, water, and building materials, and reduces traffic congestion and improves air quality. We will be putting together a steering committee very shortly to begin work on that project. The second is that we have been notified that there is another round of a variety of grants available through the Department of Transportation through your RTPA relative to environmental justice, context-sensitive planning, some more community-based transportation planning, partnership planning, and transportation or transit planning. I will be putting out a call for projects to our local agencies, specifically the city and the county, to hopefully develop and compete successfully for those grant opportunities. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Moneybags.
Just as an aside, Bill and I, at the meeting Wednesday night, will be asking you, just a heads up on behalf of Supervisor Tryon, for funding to do the RIM study, so we can come up with a mechanism. It had been on the work plan about 3 years ago.
And actually, we have an element.
Off.
We have an element of that in our current OWP.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I were to let you off the podium without mentioning West Point Bike Path. That's all. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Thank you.
What are you talking about?
He gave him a wink. I don't know what that's about.
Well, we had 4 years ago submitted a plan and thought we had funding to do them, and somehow it hasn't been completed. So I'm sure that
West Point, where is that?
it's safe route to school. It's from the neighborhoods at West Point to the
Around the
school.
school.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay. Mike?
Negotiating. Mike Prilatich, Chief Probation Officer, and I'm here today for probably standing up for the people that I work for, not just the board and the court and all that, but the people that we're charged to take care of, so to speak, in the community. That's the offenders, whether they be adult or juveniles. And there's been some, maybe if you read the local papers, there's been some discussion about, the potential move for the probation department to down the middle of town. Personally, I think we should stay here on campus. That's where we be. We belong for the court and all that. All our partners are here. But the fact of the matter is that looks like a place that we might have to move. So I don't want to get into that discussion or the economic value of whatever. I just want to remind the community that a community is everybody who's here. It's the people who have money. It's the people who have no money. It's the people who do everything right in their life, and it's the people that make mistakes. And I appreciate the people that are coming to our office that are trying to change their lives. So I just want to say that.
Thank you, Mike. Stephanie?
Good morning. Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. I apologize if I missed this. I had to step outside for a few minutes, but I had made a request for an urgency addendum, and I wondered if I need to present it at this time or if it's going to
the answer is no. What I thought I would do is make that item 9A on the agenda, or ask to do that, so we haven't got there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Joe Kelly. It is a well-established principle in criminal jurisprudence that an act or omission does not make a man guilty unless he be so by intention. October 25th, consent agenda item 4, waiver of a potential conflict of interest, stated, technically a conflict in the remotest sense. What wasn't disclosed was a possible ethics concern, which created a violation of the Brown Act. What is that violation of the Brown Act? We, the people, have not given up our sovereignty for the right to know. And I feel you folks did not disclose certain issues that were pertinent. So with that, I request you bring back the item for reconsideration with full disclosure. Thank you.
Joe, what was the item?
What was,
Item 4, it was the waiver of a potential conflict of interest for a funding for somebody to,
an attorney?
to represent the sheriff's department for purchase, I guess, of software.
Yes.
But there's another issue there that is an ethics issue, and it wasn't disclosed.
Yes, it was. It was in the board packet. It was a public document.
I didn't read anything, and I did go over the board packet because I went back to your office and asked for it, and what I was given just showed what was written by the attorney and what was written by the deputy county counsel. There was no discussion of the other, what I consider to be a potential ethics violation.
What is that potential?
Ask Mr. Jones. If you want to, I will go into it.
The suggestion apparently is that the attorney involved, Anita Park, lives with me, and I see no ethical issue whatsoever, but I haven't been involved in it. David Sirius has handled it.
Well,
the conflict issue needed to be addressed because she has potential for a conflict.
That's
the fact that she resides with me, in my judgment, was well known and is not in any way, shape, or form an ethical violation. I practice the highest ethics.
And I appreciate what Mr. Jones is saying. That he is well known is possibly true, because I didn't know it. I was told by someone else, and I went to and confirmed it with somebody else in Mountain Ranch. So then I became one of the informed people now. But I also ran it by someone for a kind of a legal opinion, and they said, yes, ethically, it should have been disclosed. And if without that disclosure, because he is the operational officer of the county counsel's office, puts it in his lap. The other thing is the violation of the Brown Act without the disclosure.
There is no violation of the Brown Act.
Ma'am, when we have something that says, and it's in the very first paragraph of the Brown Act, states we have not given up our sovereignty by electing you folks to represent us, and we are ensured that we are to receive full disclosure. We do not give up that right.
Mr. Jones is not an elected official, first of all.
Mr. Jones is not an elected official.
If you don't mind. Personally, Mr. Kelly, I don't see where you're going with this. I see more and more a parade of people that come here that judge others, perhaps, by their own yardstick. I don't know if that's the case here or not. But if you have concerns, the attorney that's handling this issue, item number 4, on the October 25th, 2007 agenda is Deputy County Counsel David Sirius, and I believe you should have this conversation at least with him.
Well,
perhaps he can put your fears aside.
And my understanding is that your board ran it, or someone ran it up the flagpole to the Bar Association. But was the concept of ethics put before there to review that issue if there was a potential problem?
As I suggested, perhaps you should ask that to the attorney that handled this.
Well, it wasn't disclosed in the documentation. I received it in
We made
with
full
a return
disclosure
phone
of all elements of this that we thought were pertinent. And if you disagree, perhaps you should take it up with the attorney that authorized this and put that package together, because this board saw no problem with it.
Well, I realize you saw no problem with it, but you also, in that document, you saw no problem with the potential of a statement of technically a conflict of interest in the remotest sense. All it takes, it took only one thing. It took for you to go to the assessor and say, bring this before the Assessment Appeals Board. We will deal with it. If we cure the problem, we have no potential conflict in the remotest sense. The other thing would have been to not do it, because it is a technical conflict. And it's stated that way.
Right.
Remotest sense means all she has to do is, when it gets to the point of that assessment appeal, and then wind up suing the county to get what they perceive to be the correctness of their appeal.
Steve.
I just wanted to try to clarify things for the public here. what came before the board was a question of conflict relating to other clients that this attorney had, and we found there to be no conflict in relation to that, specifically in regard to the work to be performed here. As I understand it, Mr. Kelly is raising an issue that's separate and distinct from that was not under consideration, and I want to agree with Bill's suggestion that if there is another matter that was not part of this, that either should or should not have been part of that packet, that be reviewed with the attorney who makes that judgment and could either come back to the board and say, no, there's not an additional technical issue that we need to deal with, or yes, there is. But to me, that's how we should proceed here, and I would hope that meeting could be set up forthwith.
Well, I offer you this. If there was a technicality and it was waived, can we folks that are expected to follow the law, if we violate the law, ask for a waiver? I don't think it's going to happen. Do you?
I don't believe any technicality was waived, Mr. Kelly.
You signed it, sir. 5-0 vote. Waived on the technicality.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask David Sirius to make a comment here.
The only way there would have been a violation was if they were married. Legally, that might have been under the code of ethics of the county, and maybe that would have had to have been disclosed. But there was no violation at all in terms of either state bar rules, or in terms of county conflict of interest, or in terms of county code of ethics. There was no violation whatsoever. It could have been my spouse, my wife, who was doing that contract, and I wouldn't have had to disclose it legally under the county code of ethics. I might have run it by you, but technically I wouldn't have had to do anything. So there was no violation whatsoever, period.
David, the other issue that Mr. Kelly brought up was the technical notification. Has nothing to do with Mr. Jones.
Okay.
But just that...
Back to square one.
Back to square
Yes.
one. In the document, it said, I have to notify you because technically I represent a client under the Board of Equalization, and I'm doing a software contract with, and had to notify us of that because under the attorney's code of ethics, that's what you have to do, right?
Correct.
So that's just a technical matter, but they're...
Correct.
And that's exactly what it was that came before us and what we approved.
Yes.
That we know that.
Exactly.
That she notified us.
Exactly.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public that wishes to discuss something not on today's agenda before we move on?
I apologize for being so late.
You're right on time.
I didn't realize there was anything happening today.
You're right on time.
It came to mind...
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Larry Baker.
And sign it.
McCollum Hill.
Thank you.
I called Steve's office and they said he was over here. So I decided to come in case.
Go figure.
Came to mind on Friday that the McCollum Hill Veterans Memorial District is planning on putting lights in the ball field. I own 2 of the pieces of property that are immediately adjacent to the ball field, have never been noticed. There was no public hearing, and it's a tremendous impact on not only my properties, but also for the entire community. I also hear that there are some grant funds coming from the county to do this. And I prepared a brief analysis of the impacts of this since Friday, and delivered a couple of them to 2 of the board members. Patty is out of town, and I think that it's just flies in the face of the community plan,
of the goals of the community and the fact that they said, well, there's only one person protest. Now there's 100% of the people that are adjacent to the property that are protesting. And I said, well, no one has been notified. This is a very, very significant impact on the community. You put bright lights on tall poles on the highest point in town, and I don't know how it could have gotten through without having any hearings and any notices. Isn't this covered by CEQA?
Well,
all right. I do believe you've raised some significant points, and what I'd like to suggest is that we meet with the Community Development Department, which outlines what the process for consideration would be. I know that's, it's a department that already has a whole lot of issues, but I think that you've raised some significant ones and that we should set that process up immediately. Stephanie Moreno is the director of that, and she's sitting in the back row. Can you raise your hand, Stephanie? Could you set up a meeting to review this and determine a process for review?
Yeah, I've got a letter here for you.
Okay. That
I carboned you, and I'd like to give it. I'm supposed to go to Tucson today for my 50th high school reunion. And so that's the reason I was a little hurried, having found out about this so late, so that nothing happened while I was gone.
I don't think anything's on the agenda.
Yeah, we have not. This has not come to the board yet, and I'm not
even
sure.
Should have.
Well, I'm not even sure that the funding has come through for it yet. But let's first do some fact finding, find out exactly where this stands, and then set up an appropriate process for review.
Janice Elliott, Assistant County Counsel. I just want to note that the district is a separate public agency.
Yes, this is not.
And they're the agency that would do the environmental review. We would not be doing any environmental review of that, but we can meet with the district representatives and discuss what they need to do in that. Right. So I would suggest that come through me rather than the community development agency.
Because they said they didn't need any environmental review. They'd been told by the county they didn't need any.
I've not had any discussions with anybody, so if you can give me the name of the person you talk to, I'll call them.
Tom Ringman.
Okay.
So
that's a copy of the letter. That has nothing to do with
Janice, this meeting needs to be with the McCollum Hill Lighting District or the McCollum Hill Parks?
McCollum Hill Veterans Memorial District owns that property, and they would be the lead agency under CEQA, not the county.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, nevertheless, I think we should try to facilitate, because I'm not sure that lead agency is steeped in either process or land use issues.
Okay.
So
I'll talk to you after the board meeting if it's possible.
I'd be delighted to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Larry. Is there any other public comment today for an item not on today's agenda? Okay, we're going to move at this time. We're going to move on to item number 9.
Can we take like a 5-minute break?
Certainly, yeah. Why don't we make it 10? We'll take a 10-minute break, folks.
So, have you allocated money to? No, we haven't allocated. So I assume it's part of it. But yeah,
how are you?
CDBG and not through the county as I understand it. It's through the Veterans District. There may be money related to probabilities. That's what I was and I think that's the stuff that's pending.
seemed to go a little longer than we anticipated. And at this time, we're going to move along to items number 10 and 11 from the Human Resources Agency. Item number 10 is discussion of possible action regarding resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for the first 5 Calaveras. And Francine?
Thank you for moving the item. I have two separate negotiations scheduled, one beginning at 11, so I wanted to make sure that I was able to keep my commitment. The first item that I have before you is a resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for First Five Commission. First Five Commission is proposing 2 personnel changes, and they were told that they would have to wait until the county adopted final budget to bring their items before you. Administration is in support of the 2 items, and so we're just looking for approval from the board to move forward with that.
Yes, and as the person sitting on I'm a First Five Commissioner, we reviewed this in our last meeting, and it is the unanimous recommendation of the First Five Commission that this be approved. And I would like to make the motion to that effect.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0. We'll move on to item number 11, discussion and possible action regarding resolution authorizing the Calaveras County Council of Government, I got the wrong C's here, COG, to transfer out of Calaveras County's retirement system and become a new contracting agency with the California Public Employees Retirement System.
This is really a long overdue item. Actually, when I came in 97, COG was first formed. We hired the first COG director. And at the time when we were setting up the agency, we had done some research in the administrative office, and actually kind of a coincidence with the Brent Harrington, who was the CAO at the time. And one of the decisions that we made was that COG, from that point forward, could not contract out with CalPERS for a bunch of various items that I listed in bullets for you in my memo. Was it right that the county put them under their umbrella and paid into PERS and all the other benefits? We are now being audited by PERS, and we know that once we do get the audit report, we know that we will have issues with COG. So in the meantime, COG is actually now taking over all of the responsibilities as they were an employer of their own. They have received an employer ID number, and they will now be contributing to their own employees with a reasonable rate. We made some agreements through conference calls with PERS so that it would be in the best interest of the employees and they would not be penalized. There are a few rules that I think in the board approving this that they need to know. The COG employees that were employed with the county, when they go to retire, they follow the county system for those years that they were with the county. Anytime when they move over now under the COG contract with the date of, I believe the new date is July 2nd, they will now move forward under the COG contract. So if the county were to increase its PERS retirement benefit through a contract amendment, and the COG employees are now under the COG contract, they would not get any benefit of any increased contract, and vice versa as they move forward. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that point. Administration is in support of this. It's the right way to go. We would eventually have to make this step anyway once we do receive the PERS audit. And so you know, the audit occurred a year ago, and we are still waiting that report. So once PERS does issue it, we do know that there would be a line item on the COG employees. And we have worked with Tim and Melissa very cooperatively, and they've been very patient in us working through and trying to get this happen for the COG.
Any questions or comments from the board?
As the board representative, Bill and I are on the COG board. The COG board discussed this. There was really no option, and it had to work out. And putting our COG hat on, we thank the county for working with the COG to make this happen. I would move this resolution.
Did you have a comment, Steve?
I didn't have a comment, but I had a question. This is certainly in recognition that they are a special district and that they have certain separate and distinct qualities from the county. How many other similarly situated districts are we dealing with? For instance, First Five appears to be something that's somewhat similar. Are there others?
I don't believe there's any others. Jim and I are going to have a conversation today about First Five. There's a
First
little
Five
bit of...
doesn't fall in this category.
Yeah, they're part of an entity. My understanding from David this morning is they're part of county government where COG is truly unique. But we don't have any other entities that I'm aware of that fall under the same guidelines.
Conceivably, if there were ever employees, LAFCO could be. In some jurisdictions, I know they've broken off, but you don't have any employees.
All right, and I'm thinking that there may be several others along those lines that don't have employees yet, but that we may need to define our relationship carefully.
Well, the guidelines are real clear, and we had a couple of pre-meetings with PERS as part of the audit, and I now understand those rules and their procedures and definitions. So I agree with Brent. If we were ever to make any county employees, then they would fall under the county. If you get into other entities and you try to put them under the county umbrella, as we have in the past, because they're small entities, we provide lots of multiple services to them, it would be illegal. And it does, in the end, penalize those employees. We were able to, with much resistance from CalPERS, and I believe, what was the initial rate from PERS? It was astronomical. 35%. We were able to work that down to a reasonable percent of 10 to 12. And again, this was the right way to go, but I don't know that we would have the same set of circumstances and them being as patient with us in the future now that we do understand the rules.
But also add for information is one of the reasons we did not make them separate is because there was a real question whether or not COG would exist, because COG was created out of controversy with the LTC, and at least from the standpoint of my office, we had county employees working there. If we switched them over and they went out of existence, what would that really mean? And so it was done with the best interest of the employees to keep them as county employees. It's hard for me to believe it's been around as long as it has now, but there was a method to the madness at that time.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. This time we'll move on to item number 9, which is discussion and possible action regarding minute order to 1, approve contract between the County of Calaveras and Quadnoff to provide planning services for the Rigid Trinitas project in the amount of $87,900. Secondly, to approve a contract between the county and Michael and Michelle Nemi to reimburse the county for the Quadnoff contract to provide planning services for the Rigid Trinitas. And third and lastly, to approve a budget adjustment for said amount, increasing appropriate revenue and expenditure line items requires a 4/5 vote of the board.
Good morning. Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. Since we placed this item on the agenda, we've received a number of email correspondence, particularly over the weekend, asking questions relative to the contract with Quadnoff that we will need additional time to consult with council and respond to. So what I'm asking today is for you to open for public comment relative to the contracts, but that you give us another 2 weeks, continue it for 2 weeks, so that we can prepare responses to the questions that were raised and address those when it comes back to the board.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Those of you folks who have showed up here to address this issue, if you understand correctly, that the action on this issue is put off for 2 weeks. However, since you showed up today, we are going to take public comment, if you wish, on this agenda item. So we can start with Marty Crane.
Do I sign in again?
Just state your name.
Marty Crane, Valley Springs. In the interest of staying focused, because there's so many arms and legs to this, I wrote it down, so bear with me. I'm just going to read it. Dear Supervisors, obviously I'm not a contractor, a developer, or even a land use planner. I am one of many Calaveras County residents very much interested in making sure that the many priceless treasures and attributes of our county are preserved for future generations and for those citizens that come to visit because they are not able or fortunate enough to actually live here. That being said, again, I would like to encourage us all to resist the urge to view each other as having taken up sides because we have chosen to ask questions and toss our views and observations into the mix for consideration as we work through the countless challenges that make up community development. That being said, I've been watching the flurry of media and letters to the editor for some time and have a few thoughts and concerns. The first of which is, of those in favor of the Trinitas development project, how many of them are some of those $50,000 membership holders with a vested interest in seeing the project expand? It's just a thought. The continuing saga of Trinitas has reflected an ongoing manipulation of the rules we're all supposed to abide by, or maybe they're just telling us, the planning department supervisors or whoever, what they think we want to hear in order to get a favorable outcome. I have no clue. Everyone knows we're in the middle of a tedious, time-consuming general plan update, so pushing a project through before the written picture of our individual communities are drawn would seem to leave more gray area and less development scrutiny. The fact is that our county and country lifestyle have quietly been on a collision course with the bottom line developers looking at us with mega dollar sign profits in their eyes. Some or many of these developers could very well bring creative solutions to some of the challenges we face, and at the same time adding to those issues. While the bigger projects are pushing the development of our unique area, they are not allowing our growth to occur naturally. We're already playing catch-up in providing services and protection to our existing communities. While it is apparent that many developers have discovered the gold mine that we all call Calaveras, we need to remember that we hold all the cards. We can and should say what, where, how, when, and no. Not everything is a good fit for Calaveras. If the project is right for us, great. If not, then better it go away. So while some projects may go away, others will come along later looking for the piece of the gold mine after we have structured in writing the playbook rules, making it all a healthier and less stressful process. Just because other counties choose to build and compromise historical sites and areas as well as the natural beauty that sets them apart from others does not mean we in Calaveras have to play copycat. We can choose to design our county and individual communities to include only what we want and need to enhance the country lifestyle we have come to appreciate. If and when we have rules, we must all adhere to them. It is the duty of our elected and appointed officials to enforce them and take appropriate and decisive action when violations present themselves. Code enforcement comes to mind. Rewarding violators is inappropriate, sets the stage for others to follow suit, and opens up the county to lawsuits. The Trinitas project is a speculative financial investment that has built-in costs, including an EIR and review thereof. This is a cost of doing business. Why is it thought to be an appropriate use of taxpayer money to, quote, loan money to any private developer, especially one that's apparently has their own rule book? Our county is so strapped that we can't even find the funds to adequately support all the needed services that we want to for our vulnerable populations, but somehow we're ready and able to become a lending institution. What incentive do they have to pay it back if the project is not approved? Perhaps a yes decision has already been made just by just going with the flow and following the easy road instead of taking the appropriate and decisive actions in response to breaking the rules by which we are all governed. What would motivate us to put $87,000 at risk? If we truly have an extra $87,000, I can think of a lot better uses for it than bankrolling a developer with this private venture. By the way, why are we even considering an after-the-fact EIR? It's my understanding that you can't possibly do an accurate EIR if you've already graded and cemented over everything. Also, to say it's the only a little private course for personal use seems dishonest. One doesn't just all of a sudden build a full-blown golf course, clubhouse, and housing development. That takes time, money, and planning. The developer's money, not ours. This is like one person writing his own community plan. Never mind how his existing neighbors feel about the radical changes he's making to the area where they have invested their life savings and made plans for their family and future. Respectfully, Marty Crane, citizen, just one of many. And like I said, I'm not a developer. These are just thoughts I want to throw out there because I hear them from all kinds of sources, and there may be other people out there, I'm sure, that have the same concerns or questions. So, answers, I'm sure, will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Marty, for your questions and for your concerns. I just want to clarify that we're not approving or denying this project today, for one thing. And this the money here, the 87.9, is not county money. It is not a loan from the county. It is what we are here to do today is to either agree or not agree to allow the applicant to pay this money for the planning services. They pay it to the county. The county hires the consultants so that there's an objectivity here, but the applicant has to pay the money, not the county. So
it sounded like in the write-up that it was loaned to them, they would repay.
No.
I thought it said that they would repay.
Anyway, I just wanted to, because that is a valid concern. And what we'll do today is, folks, I'm going to ask that you limit your comments to the agenda item because, as I said, we are not here to discuss the progression necessarily for the past, I don't know how many years. We're not here to approve or deny this project today. The agenda item is simply a minute order to approve a contract to have some environmental work done. And we're not even going to make that decision today because we haven't had time to respond to some of the concerns, and we'd like to do that. So the decision even to take action on today's agenda item is put off for 2 weeks. But since you folks took the time out of your day to show up, I thought it was only fair to offer you the opportunity still to address your concerns. But try to limit your comments to the agenda item and not the various aspects of the project overall. But
Can you just clarify one thing on it? What prompted me to do this what prompted me to write this and come here today was my misunderstanding, apparently, of what is written in here. So what I'm wondering is, it says that they would reimburse the county. So does that mean that before the work is done, they pay the money?
we're going to, Stephen Moreno is going to keep track of all these questions that are asked by the public, and then she'll be able to come up and answer those concerns for you.
I have an appointment also, so I have to dash. So I'll see you on CCTV. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Marty.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayhew.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Lou Mayhew. I did want to comment on whether or not it's an appropriate or a good idea to employ quad canop. Here are copies of a letter and a couple of supporting documents. I would start with the DEIR. This document was authored by an agent for the developer. That tends to be a little problematic. However, it was given legitimacy by independently reviewed by Quad Canop. So apparently it passed their scrutiny. Many of, and that, both documents, the EIR and the technical appendices. So they've already seen this. In a letter of September 21st, they write and they indicate difficulties in defending the document. I think there is an issue here of whether or not the company has perhaps a bias toward approving projects rather than unbiased, objective analysis of the projects. Again, their stamp of approval, legitimacy, is on that document. And now you're going to consider hiring them to evaluate the comments. Let me go on. In the letter of the 21st, there are several parts that say, in fact, it's mentioned in the first paragraph of the letter, that the developer's attorney has been in contact with Quad Kanab requesting the use of a specialist. I find that a little troubling.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, requesting use of?
A particular specialist in evaluating I think it's the biological section. If indeed Quad Kanab is now going to take on an independent role, then they need to do that. But having the applicant's attorney involved at this point, trying to influence the selection of a specialist to review or help them respond to the comments, I think is a bit of a slippery slope. Will Quad Kanab be objective in what they do? If you look at the language of the letter of the 21st, they constantly talk about the need to defend. The need to defend the work. And basically they say we'll have to do one thing or another in order to adequately defend. That's not the kind of language I would hope to hear from an independent, objective review of those comments, to give the comments a fair chance, a good hearing. The point is not to defend. The point is to look at the legitimacy of those comments and respond appropriately. And if appropriately means more studies or, yeah, you have a good legal point, say so. That to me is the appropriate role. The Quad Kanab letter on where they talk about water is of special concern. The writer says he doesn't even understand how the conclusions regarding water were derived in the EIR. How can that be? They reviewed the document. If they had concerns, they should have said so then. They go on to say that we may need to retest on water. But then, very troubling, they say, of course, if the golf course and its water are part of the baseline, then this issue is probably not significant. Now, this is a legal theory that the county advanced, that the golf course is an assumed starting point. Set that aside. Looking for a theoretical legal loophole to get around accurately assessing the impact on water in the aquifer is not something I would even hope that an objective consultant to respond to comments would say. So that's very troubling. In their letter of the 21st, Quad Kanab doesn't even acknowledge the baseline issue of whether or not you should use the golf course as a starting point or not. Now, they may consider it, but that's such a pivotal issue in this whole, in the comments and the adequacy of the EIR, that it would seem to me in their letter to Mr. Selman that should have been referenced. Closely related to that is the letter of the 21st from Quad Kanab doesn't even indicate an awareness of the failure to have a real no-project alternative. That is also a pivotal issue, and I would have expected perhaps, because they had given cursory, apparently, review to the comments, I would have expected that they would have responded that this is an issue, an important issue, and we'll have to look at it. Finally, they may not be aware of Quad Kanab, but it would seem to me that piecemeal construction of this golf course and resort has continued. As, even this year. In March of this year, they cut a road from where the proposed lodge will be down to Hospital. There were no encroachment permits pulled. After about a week of work, and complaints were lodged, They were given a cease and desist order, and several days later they did stop. But that was a week and a half into building the road. Other construction has continued since the notice of preparation in December '05. The county put them on notice then that continued work on the project could jeopardize the EIR, and that if they continued, a new EIR might have to be done, or certainly on the any activity that continued from 2005 to the present. Well, that has. And I would think an important part of Quad Canop, in fact, one of their first items of business should be to go into that property and assess from the date of note of preparation to the present how much more work has been done. Because I think that would clearly call for perhaps a new notice of preparation, or certainly a new EIR, or portions of the EIR on the work from that point to the present. And again, any reference to that was not in the Quad Canop letter. I guess I wouldn't expect it to be unless the planning department had let them know of that ongoing effort. So I guess what I would say is the citizens of, I think the western side certainly, feel that they have been let down by their county government as they've watched the construction of this over the process or over the time period of about 4 or 5 years. I think they are hoping that as you go forward to complete a final EIR, that any consultants you use will truly be unbiased, objective, and respond in an appropriate and honest way to the many, many comments, many thoughtful comments that were submitted. I would have to say, based on the evidence so far, I would not hire Quad Canop to do that. All I have to do is look at a company that signed off on this, which I think is grossly inadequate. And why would you go back to the source? Unless you can explain the criteria they were to apply when they independently reviewed this document is different from what they would do in responding to analyzing the comments. Unless there's a difference there, it clearly looks like they're more interested in facilitating approval of projects than an honest evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayhew.
Board members, my name is Kathy Mayhew, and I'm going to shorten my remarks. I'll pass out the letter that I wrote, but I wanted to reinforce some of the things that Lou just said. And as one of the people who did comment on a couple chapters of the original EIR, I approach you this morning wanting to believe that my voice and others who undertook that effort will be heard. We didn't know a whole lot about the process when we started, but in 3 months we've learned a whole lot, and some of us have become rather intimately familiar with the history and the proposal for the project. Like others, I believe that it's biased in its premise. I'm the one that keeps getting up and saying, but it's illegal. This golf course was built without an environmental review on AP land, and the fact that it could be used as a baseline for review of the subsequent stages of the Ridge at Trinitas golf course proposal and treated as exempt from environmental review or mitigation is a faulty starting point for the original DEIR. The attorney hired by Keep It Rural Calaveras and the staff at Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center both took great issue with the legal trappings of making that a starting point. I'm hoping that Quadknopf, if they're who you hired to do this, does recognize the faulty baseline and the corresponding faulty no project alternative that Lou already mentioned. My main emphasis in thinking about this project is always revolving around the illegality. They did not have appropriate permission to build a golf course on the land under Williamson Act contract. They were notified of that in August of 2001, told not to construct a golf course. They did it anyway. My letter, which I'll share with you, isolates at least 11 specific county codes that were violated over the first 2 or 3 years of that building. They were cited. Unfortunately, there wasn't much enforcement that followed along. In February of 2006, as Lou mentioned, they were again told after the scoping session not to continue building, but they have continued building. I would just like to share a couple of aerials, and I've handed those out to you, but this to me shows something that should be obvious to anyone, that in 2002, land that looked roughly like this, 2007 looks like that. I do not see how anyone could suggest that CEQA should not have been triggered before that took place. And to me, any EIR that comes back that does not put the golf course under review is not going to be a reasonable EIR. You can't take an illegal golf course, and it's clear from the with improvements aerial, there wouldn't be the rest of the project except that it's sitting on top of an illegally built golf course. We're doing, people, I think, misunderstand that the EIR that has been submitted kind of covers everything. It doesn't. Because of the starting point being the golf course, no environmental review has been done or is proposed to be done on the golf course itself. No mitigations are suggested. But it is clearly, just looking at the picture, the central element to the Ridge at Trinitas Golf Course Resort. It seems to me that, as such, it really doesn't matter whether the golf course was completed at the time the notice of preparation was sent out. It's legally irrelevant because it's all based on a faulty starting point. I'm hoping that the job is done right this time. I'm hoping that the county does not, once again, fail the citizens by neglecting to demand a reasonable, objective, neutral look at the comments that were made and put it back to the notion of following CEQA, not just on the rest of the project, but on the entire project. So I'm hoping that Quadknopf, if they're the people you hire, can give us some assurances that the errors and the deficiencies of the first draft are not simply perpetuated in the next. Thank you.
My name is Don Kuhn, and I'm basically really concerned about the water situation. And I want to present a map to you, which is a preview of the wells being plotted on the aerial to show the degrees of severity by color coding, which will have a index and also the APN map so they can be identified on the map in itself so that you can verify the results. Just briefly, the yellows are the ones that are low pressure and staining or pumping sand. The blues are re-drill or lower the pump, and the reds are new wells. And we are doing a well survey within 2 mile radius of the golf course, which is right here where you can see the little flags. And these have already gone off the map up here, but we have the appropriate maps to verify that. And
Mr. Kuhn, you said we are doing a well survey. Who's we?
The Keep It Rural Calaveras.
Okay.
It is a survey that we are sending out to the appropriate people in the 2 mile radius to see if there are any people out there that are not aware of what their well problem is coming from. I mean, to reestablish by that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that's basically what I had concern about, that it's going back to the same biological people, that we feel that it should be done really by experts, quality experts, not just well people. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
My name is Jackie Neal, and I live in Wallace, and I would like to say that starting with the golf course as being there is ignoring the water that's being consumed by the golf course. This area, this whole area of the county needs a complete, effective, cumulative area test on the water and what's being used and what's available and what's there before any more of this stuff goes through. And to hire someone that's already approved the draft DIR to redo it is, I think, a mistake. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address this issue?
Good morning, Chair and board members. I'm Diane Kinderman with the law firm of Abbott and Kinderman. We represent the applicant for the Ridge at Trinitas, and I was going to request that the contract be approved today, but it appears as though the postponement is a fait accompli, but we are unaware of any ethical issue that would preclude Quad Knopf from being assigned as the contractor on this. And we would also appreciate copies of the comments that were provided to the county, to which you will be responding. Maybe we'll ask Stephanie for those as well. But otherwise, in 2 weeks, either I will be here or Mr. Abbott, and we would urge that you approve the contract and get this process moving through the CEQA process to its appropriate conclusion. Thank you.
John Buckley, Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center. It's understandable that people that have concerns about the project will bring them forward, even though at this point your agenda item is strictly as to whether or not to enter into a contract and to allocate the funds and to adjust your budget. And I understand that's not even happening today. All I would urge is, I think that the comments that have been shared at this point and everything that's been discussed in the paper and so many different venues underscores the fact that this is a very unique and very controversial project, no matter what your view on it, and that the county does have a perception of having been biased, favoring the applicant. I mean, there's a lot of concerns and issues about past county actions or lack of actions. You have an opportunity here to provide to the public a clear message that you're not going to be favoring the project by whoever you hire. I would urge you to work with Community Development Department, consider input from County Council, all the rest, as to whether or not you can find the most neutral consultants to do the work that you will feel best underscores that there will not be any bias in the eyes of the public as this controversial matter goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Does any other member of the public wish to address this issue? Okay, Stephanie, do you have any comments?
Yes, Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. I have a few responses. I can't address everything at this time, but I'd like to go over a few things. Relative to the letter of the 21st, that was the original proposal that was given to Quadnoff to the county in order to complete the final EIR process for the county. County's the client. We have already rejected certain items that were included in that letter, such as the ability for the client, Rigid Trinitas, to provide their own expert testimony and work directly with Quadnoff. That's not part of the package that we are approving. So I wanted to clarify that. Just because it's in the letter originally that the attorney had offered assistance does not mean the county had intended to take up on that offer. Relative to whether or not the document is defensible, I think that's, and maybe this is more of a question for County Council, but that's more of a terminology that we use about CEQA documents and making them legally defensible. That is how we talk about our environmental documents to make sure that they have met all of the requirements of CEQA in order to move forward, bring it to the board for a project decision. I believe that that is the reference that Quadnoff is using, is that technical language, not about the fact that it needs to defend the document. And I just want to clarify that as well. And I don't know.
I would agree with that.
The water situation is not deemed by anyone to be insignificant, and it will be studied thoroughly in the EIR, and it will not be done by experts provided by the applicant. It will be subbed out to a specialist that Quadnoff will hire that we will approve. And it most likely will be the same one that is currently doing the Walls Lake Estates hydrology study. So there should be no bias in the use of that person to do the water reviews. Quadnoff did not address the baseline study where we started the baseline because we told them where the baseline was going to be. It wasn't a decision of Quadnoff, it's a decision of the county. County staff made that decision quite some time ago when the original EIR process started. There was some logic to it at the time, and primarily that the ground had already been disturbed, and if there were archaeologically sensitive or biologically sensitive areas underneath the golf course, it wouldn't do any good to go back in and redisturb lands as part of the study, and so they chose to do the baseline. It's perfectly legal to choose that as the baseline. It may not be appropriate. It is up to the county to make that decision. If the County Board of Supervisors would like staff to reconsider that baseline, we're certainly able to do that in the preparation of the EIR.
Stephanie, didn't the board approve that recommendation, if I remember correctly?
I believe that predated me, Supervisor Callaway. I'm not sure, but I don't know that the board ever took formal action. It may have had some discussion of it. It's certainly something we can bring back to the board when we bring this contract back in 2 weeks if they'd like us to reconsider that baseline. I wanted to address the issue of both Quadnoff and the county having bias on this particular application. Quadnoff is not biased in its preparation of the work for the county. It's done excellent work for the county, and there's numerous examples of that. They were asked to do a peer review of a draft EIR that had originally come in from another party. They pointed out numerous issues that needed to be addressed in the draft EIR before it was released to the public. The applicant was responsible. The applicant's client that was, or the applicant's vendor that was preparing those documents was responsible for implementing those changes into the document. Because of our lack of staff resources, we were not as thorough as we should have been in reviewing the draft document before it was issued for public comment. We ourselves have noticed numerous inadequacies and incorrect statements in it. And we take that responsibility for not catching those before it went out. That being said, we knew that those issues would be corrected before the final EIR and are normally done during the process between the draft and the final EIR. It was on no fault of Quadnoff that those comments were previously not reviewed. As far as the county's bias towards this application, it has been my understanding that the history of this county has been that when there is a co-compliance case, someone has done something without permits, people are given the opportunity to correct the situation before a heavy hand of co-compliance is put forth on them. We consider that the fact that they made application or going through a process, however lengthy it might be, to be within the established tradition of this county. We do not think that shows bias. We think it shows consistency and a lack of bias in processing this application the way we would in most others. If the County Board of Supervisors wishes us to handle this particular application differently than is normally done, it can certainly give us that direction. I think those were all of the issues that I heard that I'm prepared to address at this time. There are some issues that I would like to follow up with on the ethical issues and the conflicts of interest with counsel's office. I would not be prepared to address those today.
Thank you very much,
There was one other one, and that was Marty Crane's comment under the assumption about the funding. The way I'm reading the agreement with the applicant, they at signing would put all the money up front and then we would draw on it. So it's not a matter of borrowing. The money is there at the time of signing. Correct?
Yes, you're correct. I'm sorry I missed that. They've actually would be depositing. What we normally allow is for people to deposit a portion of the funds, and then they replenish the deposit before we run out, so that the county is never at any risk of paying for any of the monies. They had intended to tender a check today upon completion of the contract in the amount of $44,000 to begin that process. However, I told them to hold the check until such time as the contract is approved.
Okay. I'm going to bring it back to the board for comments before we move on, Russ.
I just have one question here.
Oh, sorry.
A couple of questions. One, has Quad Canop begun any work on this?
No.
No. In the letter, it points out that if additional work is needed and other experts, vendors, whatever you call them, have to be hired, that expense is in addition, and I think there are a number of other things where the expenses would be in addition. Could you comment on how you get, what happens at that point? I would like to think that Quad Canop would not have any reluctance to recommend that we have to do this and it's going to cost roughly this much. But there's a process. If you haven't been given a substantial bond or deposit up front, it seems to me, in smoothly flowing into additional tests by other vendors, that the applicant's going to have to pay for. So anyway, that's a concern I have, that it seems like your contract so far is a little bit limited, and it doesn't help you at the point where additional research evaluation is needed by outside consultants. Thank you.
The applicant would be responsible for paying all aspects of the contract. It would be addressed with an amended scope of services that they would sign to and would have to be signed and check tendered before the work began. This was an unknown project for Quadnoff, even though they had done the peer review. Because of the controversy that has arisen over the project, the amount of public comments, we're having to purchase new file cabinets just for Trinitas. So it's a little bit of an unknown as to how much it's actually going to cost, and I think they were just trying to leave that out there, that there may be additional funds needed depending on what they find in the scope of their review.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Russ?
Stephanie, you said that the water is not insignificant, and Quadnoff will hire consultants for the water studies, and they may be the same ones that did the Wallace Lake thing. Would it not be prudent at this time to try to forecast what that if that consultant did the water study for Wallace Lake Estates? That would certainly give a dartboard assessment about what this the cost of this might be. And the 87.9 is, and I don't want to diminish the importance of this compiling the responses and bracket the letters and produce 50 copies of all this, but I don't have any idea what that water study would be. But if you could do 24-hour testing programs and everything, it's bound to be tens of thousands of dollars. Shouldn't that be added to this?
The review for Wallace Lake Estates, I believe, was $19,000 for the hydrologist portion, and has just commenced. It's reviewing the same aquifers in some cases that are tied into this one, or the allegations, I should say, of the same aquifers. So some of that work will be useful for here and won't have to be rebuilt or redone. I think that if we use the same consultant, there will be an economy of a scale that's built into it, and it's until we get the work to them and they can give it to the hydrologist, we can't get an accurate estimate of how much it's actually going to be. It's that chicken and the egg, because we don't want them to do any work at all that they're going to bill us to until we actually get the contracts approved and the money from the applicant. But you're right, there shortly will probably be an amended scope to include any additional hydrology work that would be needed, and the applicant would have to pay for that up front. If at any point in time the applicant decides that they don't want to pay for continued work, the work would stop at that point. Then we would have no choice but to bring it up on a recommendation of denial because the EIR has not been completed.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
I did have a couple of things.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Stephanie, I wasn't clear on your response to one thing. The Quadnoff peer review findings you said there were a number of questions that were raised, and I wasn't clear on whether those things were included in part, in full, or not at all in the draft EIR that was put out.
They were included. I don't know if they included every single thing when they redid the draft EIR. I did not personally review it before it went out.
Okay. And I guess the other things I have are more in comment mode. I have several concerns about this stage of process, because we have been sort of approaching this in kind of this odd slippery slope that gets us into a level of public mistrust on the one hand, and a level of commitment on the part of a project developer on the other that seems to just keep on raising levels of conflict rather than resolving them. One of the central, if you read the hundreds of comments that have come in on this, they seem to fall within just a few key areas, and I thought these are important because whether we approve or don't approve ultimately this stuff, and I know we've got a lot more discussion before we do this, but there's a couple of questions in my mind that just keep coming back, and they are these recurring themes. Number one, is it possible, is it defensible ultimately to begin the EIR process after a considerable amount of change has occurred on site? Secondly, is there any concern, or should we be concerned, when we have other similarly situated businesses that have gone through one particular process? Can we alter it in this, I don't want to call it extreme, but significant, can we so significantly alter the way we do business in this neighboring venture? I want to be careful that when we consider commercial developments that we're holding everybody to similar processes and standards, and I want to make sure that there's some consistency in that, and I'm not sure I've seen an adequate comment on that. Third, the water stuff is beginning to kind of chap my hide. All right. Now, what my concern in water is this: we either have we've got a lot of different water situations. In my district, we have these fissures, and you can dip a number of straws into a certain fissure, and it's got finite, and it either draws down or it sustains, and each one is different. As I understand it, at some point on some properties, when we get to the western part of this county, we're in an aquifer that is a vast aquifer. We may be at the upper end of a bowl-like situation, and so when the whole thing gets in trouble, we're the kind of canary in the coal mine. We're the first to know about it. But there's a real question in my mind about whether almost any local development can have an impact on neighboring wells in an aquifer when we've got literally scores of thousands of wells and pumps and things sucking the life out of this aquifer, determined by another county's decisions about growth and development. And I'm trying to get a little bit more scientific about this. What I want to know is where these properties that are above the aquifer begin and end up. And is it possible that one golf course, when you think about the scores of golf courses and the actual, I think we're now in the millions of people that are somehow trying to drink from this aquifer, and the question is, what's the proportional effect? We are obligated to consider cumulative effects. But those cumulative effects have to bear in mind what is the world that we're dealing with in this particular aquifer. And I have yet to see a clear map with parcels. I know we've been working on it, but I want to know which one of these parcels are impacted by the aquifer and which ones are dealing with a completely different kind of water source. That said, I'm of the belief that golf courses in general have been pioneering the reuse of water, and it becomes almost a public service because there are water agencies that are in need to get rid of tertiary treated water. So the question is, have we thought about that at all, and is there a way to get out of this water mess altogether or not? Anyway, my final concern is that, and I guess part of this is a legal question, and part of it is simply a question of how we want to do business here. But that whole question of what's the baseline of a project, what date does that get established, and how much do you get to do between, on an ex post facto basis after having gone a certain distance, that's real important to me. And I want everybody to know that, and I want a good answer by next 2 weeks from now, because in the end, I'm unwilling to, if the answers to these things can't be found, and if our processes have been so blighted along the way, it seems to me very difficult to ask for more contributions from anybody on this. We've got a purported EIR, we have a document to review, and it may be time simply to cut everybody's losses, get to the point of whether this is a project and a process worthy of this county or not. Anyway, that's my comments.
Thanks, Steve.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair. Let me initiate by saying I basically agree with the comments that Steve just put into the public record. I think as far as...
It's not Armageddon, folks. It's okay.
even though they were of a very limited nature. And my own opinion is that as far as the baseline, anything that can be associated with the project as proposed should be included in the baseline. That includes, as a minimum, the golf course. if there's anything else that happened prior to the golf course or concurrent with the golf course that is a part of this project, that should be included in the EIR. The baseline for the EIR should not come subsequent to the golf course. Secondly, I think there is a perception, and maybe perhaps validly so, on Quad Nov to come in and do the additional work. They are on the draft EIR. They did review the draft EIR. The last thing we would need in an initial review is somebody defending an earlier decision. So I think we need to be very careful that any work, additional work to be done, would be by somebody that is totally independent of any earlier work. So those are my two comments on those areas. I personally think what the board should do, and I would ask the board that the board be polled on this, is I think the board should give direction to staff to bring back an action of termination on this project with appropriate findings. We should hold that hearing, and we should see if there's three. Obviously, the project proponent would be here. That would be a public hearing. He would make his case for the project to go forward. The project opponents would make their case for the project to not go forward. And I think we owe it both to the project proponent and to the citizens, given the volume of information that's currently in the record. I think that volume of information is fairly conclusive of where we are today, but I think we owe it to both parties and to the board and to staff of the county to see if there are 3 votes to continue this project. If there are not 3 votes to continue this project, then there's no reason spending another $87,000 and holding endless more hearings, and it'll be a lot more than $87,000 before we finish the environmental reviews and the hearing processes. So my recommendation to the board is to direct staff to bring back the appropriate findings and an action item for termination of this project and see where it goes at that point. And I think that should come back in 2 weeks, and the Quad Nov contract should come back in 3 weeks, because if there are 3 votes to terminate the project at this time, then the issue before us would become moot. So that's my recommendation to the board.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure. I mean, that's really a creative idea that Tom's put forward. My question would be, then the applicant would just submit another application. We'd start the process again, and we would still be here at some point in time, but 2 years down the road. Would that not be the applicant's choice if we decide to terminate at this point?
The applicant could reapply. I believe that they would not be able to reapply until the moratorium was lifted, so they'd have to wait until then. I would just like to put a couple comments into the record about this. Number one, this comments today are not part of the public record because this is not a public hearing, and so all these comments would have to be reiterated at the public hearing relative to any decisions that would be made in order to be considered part of the public record. Secondly, it is, again, not the current practice of the county to go back and assess the environmental conditions prior to an application. Admittedly, this is on the far end of the spectrum, but we have situations in the past, such as you've most recently seen near the City of Angels relative to the removal of trees. We've had down in Valley Springs people grading property, all of that done prior to an application, and it is not taken into effect at the time of the environmental review. That is the county's current policy, and it is well within our ability to change that policy, but I wanted to make sure that whatever policy we implement is done consistently and is going to be applied to every application from here on forth. So I just wanted to put that there as well. Secondly, I just wanted to remind the Board of Supervisors that this is a draft document. It is circulated for the purpose of getting public comment, very valid public comment. We do this on every project before we finalize it. And I understand that it might be a matter of good faith if the Board of Supervisors is not interested in this application moving forward, to not have the applicant spend the money on the project, additional monies. But I also would like to stress that it is not a complete document. We have not presented our final findings. We have not given a recommendation for or against the project yet. And so there's much work left to be done before a decision would normally be made.
Steve?
I had one additional question in relation to Tom's suggestion, which I find intriguing and expeditious, but I also want to make sure that we're square with our obligations in taking public comment in relation to projects. Would we have the authority to act in the way Tom's suggesting without first having heard that? And I'm asking county council.
It would be a public hearing, so obviously we wouldn't act first. We would act after the public hearing.
And it would be
you
in
would have
relation.
the information, and you would have the testimony. We have volumes of information currently in the record. And I just think, quite frankly, before we proceed further with this, we should have some indication from the board that there's support to proceed with this. And I think the way to do that is to basically instruct staff to come back with a recommendation of termination of the project with appropriate findings, have the public hearing, and then see where the board is. If the board wishes to proceed, fine. I don't, any project that can get turned down at any point can be resubmitted. Obviously, unless you just like spending money, most people don't just resubmit the same thing that was just rejected. They change the project of either that or they don't resubmit it. So, what we have to do is act upon the project that's before us, not on something that may be resubmitted. And I think we should, in fairness to all parties, and given as much as there is in the public record, and at the close of a public hearing where you can, everybody can put additional more, and we'll get lots more information from the public record in the next 2 weeks if the board supports my direction on this, and then see if there's support to continue with it.
A couple of logistical things. One is that we would not be able to do the notice and have it in 2 weeks. We'd need a little more time to make notice requirements. And then the second piece is, and this is a question for County Council, is I don't know if you can bypass the Planning Commission on the recommendation of denial or if it can come straight to the board, and I don't know the answer to that.
The board can bypass the Planning Commission if the board so chooses. The board is the governing body.
Okay.
I believe that's correct, but I do think we need to look at the notice requirement before you pick a date.
Well, let's see if there's support on the board to follow my suggestion. If there isn't, then you don't have to worry about it.
Could I add one comment relative to Tom? I think there's a couple of points that I heard Tom somewhat surprisingly say. You seem to be on the verge of at least continuing what you had scheduled today. But that continuance assumes, I'm going to come back in a minute, but assumes that you're going to go ahead with Quad Knuff and working out whatever details need to be made. I hear at least some of the comments being, do you even want Quad Knuff to be involved? So if you want to do something relative to today's contract or agreements other than what's before you, you need to give that direction. Number two, Tom's talking about procedurally before you even consider that. Come back and talk about really bottom line here is, do you want the project to go forward? And you almost, I was not going to say anything until everybody had talked, but it's almost like you need to talk through to see if there are three who want to consider that, and then staff can figure out the details of the proper notice and all the rest. I think we're certainly caught off guard by what Tom's suggesting, and staff will need to work out the details of it. But I see this more as a I'll say theoretical, philosophical discussion about how to proceed, and then staff can sort out the details.
Are you chomping at the bit, Steve? Or
Nope. My question's been more or less answered, although I would want to make sure whatever we did was reviewed by county council and make sure we were procedurally appropriate.
Okay, Russ?
I'm not looking forward to the time when I have to make a decision on this. Frankly, I haven't got enough information. I think for months now I've been thinking that the key to the viability, the long-term viability of this project is the adequacy of the water. I, for one, would strenuously object to making a close-the-door decision or an indication that we're leaning in that direction until we have that, at least that component. I'm also a little concerned about what this does to our overall procedure. I tend to really have a strong I support the methodology that we have with these environmental reviews and the steps that it goes through with the Planning Commission reviews, the opportunity for everybody to come in and vet their likes and dislikes through that procedural process. It's torturous and it's agonizing and it's lengthy, but I think it's totally necessary in a situation that is as vital as this. I mean, this is a very much a drop-dead, serious heart attack type of decision that we're making here. I just would admonish my colleagues here to not think capriciously about this. I don't know. I'm as much as I would like to see this come to a conclusion, I'm not ready to support Tom's suggestion at this point. I think we just need to wrestle this alligator for a few more months. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
I'm interested in what you have to say. It's in your district.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
By a couple of inches.
I'm interested in lunch, but other than that, not trying to be facetious, folks. And with all due respect to Supervisor Tryon, is the idea that you forwarded here has some merit, but I'm not there yet, Tom. I'm just not there yet, and I tend to agree with Supervisor Thomas that and with Director Moreno that we have a process here. And I know I have been perceived in various conversations in media, etc., as being a supporter and an enemy of this project, often by people who've never discussed it with me. Strange as that may seem, that seems to be the way things work sometimes. What I am a fan of is this process, and that's what I've been telling people. We have a process, and I would like to be consistent in that process. The applicant has spent a lot of money. The applicants are adults. Nobody's forcing them to do this. They know that they don't have a done deal. There's a process they need to go through. My biggest concern is that we get in too big of a hurry here. I am not for getting in a hurry about any aspect of this process. I want everybody to have their ducks in a row, present their best argument for or against the project, and go through the process that we've established, time established with the hearings and the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. We're going to depend on staff for a lot of this work. As far as the consultant, the Quadnoff, I'm not sure anybody else is even available, but I don't believe that, again, I don't believe that they are prejudiced in this project. I just don't believe that they would stake their entire reputation and their professional view on whether a golf course gets built in Calaveras County. I don't see any advantage to them there. And I respect the decision of our community development agency that these folks are and can be objective. I do believe there's a lot more work to be done. And this is the start of it right here, this minute order that is going to do the consulting work to see where we're at. The big issues here seem to be water and traffic. There's a lot of work to be done on the water and traffic here. And until that is done, I'm not ready to make a decision, to be quite honest with you. And I'm not trying to be indecisive here. I simply don't have enough information. Scientific information, as Steve mentioned. So I am not in favor at this time of scheduling a public hearing to deny or to approve this project. I think that we have the process to go through, and I think we need to be consistent. And so I would like to stick with my original suggestion, is to continue this minute order, which is simply to allow the applicant to fund additional planning services, and to continue that for 2 weeks so that not only our staff, but the applicant has time to address these concerns that have been raised today and others as well. Janice?
I'd like to make a suggestion. Since the scope of the consultant's work is going to be based on what staff believes needs to be done to respond to the comments, and since I'm hearing that there's some concern about the baseline, that was a staff decision that's never been to the board. You do have the right to have a notice due process hearing for the applicant to be involved in that discussion. And I would suggest that perhaps we should do that, because if you do want to pick a baseline that does not include the golf course, that will probably increase the scope of the work for the consultant. And we can provide you the information as to why the baseline currently does include the golf course, and it's obviously up to the board to make a determination on what you want to be the baseline to be. At this point, the only other way to get it into the document is to provide some additional alternatives. And if we go along that route and ultimately the board decides at the final hearing that they want to change the baseline, we'll have to go back and redo the entire final EIR.
So you're suggesting is that we have that discussion before we make this decision?
Yes.
How much time would staff need to prepare for that
It needs to
discussion?
be a notice due process hearing, which means we need to get it in the newspaper, and we need to do a staff report on that. And I can tell you right now, I can't get to that this week. And I'm sure we don't have Bob this week either.
No, I don't want to do this in a hurried manner, which is the way we seem to be doing too many things lately. So the suggestion from County Council and from the CDA, I want that suggestion to give you adequate time to prepare for this.
Well, I would request at least 3 weeks, which means the board packet would be due a week from tomorrow. And I think we could probably do that, and we could get it in the newspaper. So a minimum of 3 weeks would do it.
Okay, 3 weeks would put that to our 5th Tuesday, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, then 4 weeks would be better.
Okay. So, let's see. Pardon me?
Give her 4.
We're here, 1, 2, 3, 30th. We're on the 9th today, 16th, 23rd, 30th.
The 4th week, November 6th.
All right. I would support that.
Also, following up on Brent's suggestion, I think it would be wise for the board to give direction to staff on whether they want us to continue with Quad Knopf or want to go out and look for a different consultant.
I'll just make some comments. Stephanie did say that her agency did not accept this letter. That was good. I had real issues with the September 21 letter. So I won't go into them now since you didn't accept them, and I don't want to be redundant. But I went to the contract, and the only place where I found anything relating to the big issues I had with that was item 6 on changes. And so I feel like maybe there needs to be something else in the contract as to whether they are objective or not objective. I guess I'll just leave that recommendation to staff, understanding that the perception is they're walking on thin ice. And I thought you did a good job of explaining why you felt that the responsibility rests with the county, not with them, and I appreciate that. So I'll just wait for the 4th. The other is we had Exhibit A. I think that might have been a mistake. Okay. All right. Thank you. Is that going to be coming to the board on...
No, it's under the $50,000 contract amount.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So the recommendation is to continue today's agenda item indefinitely, or at least until after a decision is made about the baseline on the 4th of November.
6th,
Yes.
isn't it?
I mean, excuse me, the 6th of November.
Yes.
And I would support that. Marina?
Yeah.
Okay. Russell?
Well, we need to poll on the quad knob issue, do we not?
That's fine, yeah, I'm fine with quad off, but I don't know how everybody else.
Let's poll the board.
I think that Quadnoff is a fine firm, and they could maintain their objectivity, in my opinion.
Okay. Marina?
Fine.
Steve?
With the appropriate scope, fine, but that'll be determined in that next thing. But I'm not guaranteeing it, because I don't want anybody doing an inadequate or short of the mark.
I think after we get board direction on the baseline, that we can work together, put together a pretty fairly accurate scope of work.
All right.
Okay, so is that affirmative?
That's affirmative based on us achieving that.
Okay, Tom?
No, I would change the consultant.
Okay. Okay, well, you have 4 board members that want you to go ahead.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and notice it then.
Do we get to play in the tournament?
I'm going to tell you, that is one reason I would agree with Tom.
We get the board to take action
I mean-
on the agenda. The board needs to take action on the agenda item.
I move, well, we've changed the agenda item though, Jim.
You're doing two
but
things.
we're-
You're continuing today's action, today's scheduled items indefinitely. And
Just withdraw it.
And number 2, you're directing staff to take the appropriate action to schedule consideration on November 6th. How do I want to word this?
Establish a baseline.
Establish a baseline for the associated project. So you're really taking 2 actions, which you can do in one action, in one motion.
I move what Brent just said.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries on the 5-0.
If I could just make one,
Certainly.
I think it's on topic here. I would like to communicate to the applicant and to everybody involved in this. The likelihood that I'm going to vote favorably on this is kind of directly proportional to the continued moving along like business as usual out there. I mean, my patience with the continued grading when things are supposed to be at a standstill. The advertisement, I don't know, unless people are fabricating phantom golf tournaments, there is a possibility that that might be going on. But if it is true that golf tournaments and commercial enterprise is being conducted there in the absence of approval by this board, I'm not looking upon that with favor at all.
I'd like to lend my voice to that, too. I don't think that you can ask for benefit from a process and make a mockery of it at the same time.
I'd just like to add in that we will be drafting another letter. We've had verbal discussions with the applicant about they're not supposed to be doing anything out there. We're going to put it in writing. We're going to monitor it. And if we see any more evidence that they're continuing to have golfing activities out there, we will be bringing forward a recommendation of denial on the project.
Thank you.
Immediately, because we need to make sure that they are adhering to what the board's directive has been. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank...
Ms. Kinderman wanted to comment.
Diane Kinderman again for the applicant. I just received a copy of that notice. I was unaware of any golf tournament going on out there. A lot of advertising had been started prior to this process, and they had kind of assumed that they would get through CEQA in adequate time. I don't know how current this is. I'm going to make some phone calls and find out when we're done. We would also be happy to provide you with a list of whatever activities are going on out there, if that would give you a comfort level. But I'm not even aware that this is current, so...
Well, that's this week current.
I don't know. I just...
You know, it's fortunate, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't fortunate that you bring this up, but this was just sent to me. I don't know how valid or how current it is either, but the applicant or applicants are not being very good advocates of their project when this sort of document is published.
Are you referring to the tournament?
Yes, and this type of thing. And for us to, everybody that I hear that is against this want to know why we're not down there stopping this, stopping that. Believe me, the county has difficulty having enough staff to set up a camp down there and find out who's playing golf, who's not playing golf, who's buying olive oil, so on and so forth. And these things keep coming up. I had a telephone call from a constituent down there about the applicant building a very large encroachment with no permit. And to be honest with you, I couldn't believe somebody would do that. So I drove down there. It takes a couple of hours of my time. I don't mind doing that, but I seem to be running a little short of time these days. And that was when the most recent stop work order. But over a year ago, the applicant was told to stop. Stop. And I remember I looked through all my stuff. This may seem a little sophomoric to you, but it doesn't to me. Webster's Dictionary, stop, is basically cessation of activity. To cause, to cease motion, activity. To cause or cease operation, cessation, arrest, halt, termination. Those are all in there. It doesn't include golf tournaments. It doesn't include new encroachments. And it doesn't include any more grading. And the applicants are working up, pardon me for my colloquialisms, but they're working up a big scab on their nose. And somebody's going to rip it off. So what the applicant in their best interest needs to do is to stop until some of these issues are settled. And I would hope you would convey that to them.
I appreciate you making your concerns clarion, and we will do that as well to the client.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, where are we here? We've
Your urgency.
we pretty well beat that to death, folks. This time, okay? So you show up next week for the next meeting. Okay. I am going to ask the board if we can engage in an urgency item. It regards the listing of BLM land and its relationship to the general plan. So I'll poll the board first if we can do that. It'd be an item 9A. And
Yes.
Do it.
First to discuss the motion.
All right. I need a motion for this.
The board needs to make the finding that the item requires immediate attention by forthwith.
Okay, well, why does it?
Okay. Stephanie?
Time sensitive.
The urgency item, why do we need to do this?
I just became aware last week that staff was working on a catalog of BLM lands. They're supposed to issue a notice of decision this week relative to their resource management plan that would list certain lands within counties in its plan area that would be available for sale exchange to the private sector. We haven't had a chance to take a look at this list. I submitted a copy of it today of the lands that we have that would be captured by this resource management plan this morning. It's several pages worth of properties. Some of them may or may not be important to the county. However, we wanted an opportunity to ask them to include all of our lands under the same protection that was afforded in previous resolutions while we do our general plan update. And at the point at which we complete our general plan update, we'll have better understanding of if these are part of our recreational needs, if these are lands that maybe should be released in order to provide some adequate access for certain properties, or maybe to make better sense of where BLM has their properties. But we just want to have them exempt these lands right now from sale until we can have a better review of it. And my understanding is that they're issuing the notice this week. We've been in communication, email communication with them. Supervisor Callaway also has been communication. Most of the lands fall within District 2 and 4. There is, I think, one piece in District 3, one or two pieces in District 3, and some in District 1. and that is why the urgency. We're asking that the board allow the chair to send a letter to them asking that they retain these under BLM ownership till we complete our general plan update.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yes, but I guess the further question would be is, if we're just going to do a blanket, we don't want you to sell any parcels, what do we base that on? I mean, maybe there's some parcels that make good sense to sell.
We base that on only having today to get it done. There's been a lot of work done on this map, as you can see, by Karen Waldeer from the Fish and Game Commission on her own time, along with some of our staff. What I'd like to do is do the initial letter, then come back in. We can do a study session or handle it during the general plan visioning with the board. Take a look at what lands you think might be appropriate. For example, we might want to keep some that are contiguous for habitat issues. There are all sorts of reasons to consider why to keep them in our within our control, so to speak, at this time. But then eventually we would say that some of these are not worthwhile having or may even be attractive nuisances for the county.
I'd like to add another element of this consideration. There are, as you can see, a lot of that orange is in District 2, and a lot of that is along the North Fork and other areas that have been in continuous consideration for recreational. We have the Coastal Crest Trail going through there. We've got issues of Wild and Scenic River. We have SPI land that goes down into there and other areas that might be traded off for more sensitive things. So, in fact, there's a great argument for some of this being sold. The question is, can we integrate those with plans that are underway in both community planning process and in our general plan process, and make sure that what they do is consistent with what we want. Some of this has to do with having some element of local control before other folks determine our fate.
Absolutely. A good example is there's a conservation easement currently in process in Copperopolis area, 4,000 acres. It borders some 2 different BLM pieces. It would make sense for that landowner to exchange with BLM one of the smaller pieces and make it contiguous to the larger piece in terms of our recreational needs and in terms of that private property owner's property rights. So we'd like to be able to preserve those opportunities for the county to facilitate.
Well, what is BLM doing this week?
They're issuing a record of decision on their resource management plan that includes what lands might be potentially available for sale in the future, is my understanding.
Well, shouldn't we wait to the record of decision and then see what lands in our county they're proposing for sale?
These are the lands that are showing up in their draft document, is my understanding. Well, they're not being retained as not needing to be sold, so they can go either way with them. We're asking them not to leave it up in the air for them to be approached by a private party at this time.
And the record of decision is a pseudo-NEPA action, is it not?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, you don't want to get into this piece.
So you're saying everything that's shown here is basically subject to being sold or exchanged?
It's included, my understanding, and I didn't work on this personally, but staff indicated these parcels are ones that have not been covered by previous resolutions of the board. The ones in yellow were previously covered by the board in their resolution. The ones in orange were not. And so we're asking that all of it be included. We can send the letter letting them know and follow it up with a resolution in about a month and greater staff and board input if you'd like. We're just trying to preserve our options, I guess, so to speak.
The board took an action earlier, and that was the yellow.
Yes.
The board specifically did not include the orange.
No, those were not up for discussion.
It was not up for consideration.
We haven't looked at this. No.
Okay. Well, I guess I would support it if basically the letter says that we're just not opposed to you ever selling or trading anything, but that we would like to have a significant input, and if we oppose it, that you would abide by the board's decision.
In previous dealings with BLM, we're sometimes the last to know after a sale is completed.
You should put the item on the agenda if you're going to discuss the merits of it.
Yeah, first of all, let's decide if we can have the urgency item discussed before we discuss it. How's that sound? Okay, is there a motion for that?
I certainly move that we discuss it.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0 now. Let's discuss it. I think the intent of the letter is going to be authorization to send this letter to request the land be retained by BLM for public use as part of their resource management plan while the county updates the general plan, so that we're just giving us time to reconnoiter and see if there is a use for this land, that we would like them to remove it from the sale list. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have numerous issues in this county that we're struggling with, one of which is habitat conservation plans that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is requiring us to develop, and BLM could be a partner, and BLMs could be helpful in mitigating some of those concerns. So that would be another issue.
I think we have a representative here from the Fish and Game Commission.
Karen Wildeer's here, and she's the one that worked so hard on getting this packet of information together for us.
Thank you.
Hi. I have been communicating with BLM.
You identify yourself for the record.
I'm Karen Waldeer.
Sign in, please.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
with Indian Ridge Preserve, under which I've been communicating with BLM for the past 2 years on this. In preparing this document, I realized that the parcels from the 1997 resolution that I presented to the board back then, those 33 parcels were not identified in BLM's map holdings. And so BLM told me that I needed to provide proof to them that we in fact did do that. And so I went back and got old resolutions and all the data and put together a packet and mailed it to Mr. Haig. I am not an employee of the county. I'm not part of the staff, but I did prepare these months ago, and I called the planning department the 1st of August because I realized that supervisors had not noticed any of the notices that had come to them from BLM, and I had said that I'm working with the parcels adjacent to conservation easements in District 2, and I pointed out that there are other districts that had parcels in that 97 resolution, and that those supervisors need to call Mr. Haig and let him know that. James Barnes is the management plan coordinator for BLM, and he said that they would accept a phone call from the supervisors. So I believe right now you don't need to put it together in a letter. They just need to hear from you that you are wanting to go forward and looking at these new parcels to put into a new resolution for this year.
I wanted to clarify that, Karen. I had email conversations with him over the weekend, and I think that there was a misunderstanding, and he was talking about the resolutions that were previously adopted by the board that we still plan on honoring, not about the new parcels, and that's why I want to formalize that to make sure that the county has it in formal written form. I don't think that the telephone call is going to preserve that.
And I think it's important also that we speak as a board rather than as individuals in relation to this, because it does deal with every single one of our districts. And to have a board statement that would be timely, I think we should let them know if there is action, board action, that we should let them know today that that action has been taken, and then make sure that that gets followed up in writing.
James Barnes, the coordinator, does work or corresponds in coordination with Mr. Haig, and he was the one who had said that would be sufficient. But I do recommend a study session, and I can then explain how we assessed these parcels that I did identify on the map in orange. And we literally zoomed in on all of them. You can see those little tiny purple parcels. Those are the random BLM parcels that are not don't meet wildlife habitat, and so those are the ones that I believe would even benefit BLM because they could see all the loose odds and ends that they are able to sell off. That's what they want to do.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Any further comments from the board? Is there a motion in favor of this letter?
I move that we write a letter asking them to hold off from omitting any of these parcels until we finish the general plan update, because they're going to come back anyway in 5 or 10 years, and some of these might be here. So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0.
Thank you, Karen.
We're going to move on to board matters and then take a short break before the study session. So we'll start with Russ today.
Okay, I just wanted to report that I attended the Mountain County Water Resources meeting last Friday. It was a very informative meeting. The keynote speaker was Tim Quinn, who has been selected to be the executive director of Aqua, the organization that is charged with the responsibility of managing water resources in the state. Some very interesting comments about a recent court decision, a judge's decision to limit the amount of pumping that could go out of the Delta. That's going to have some fairly wide-ranging ramifications for Northern California. I'll be attending this Friday. I intend to go to the party barbecue. Hope to see all of you there. But that's
barbecue?
All. Party.
East Bay Muds.
Yeah. East Bay Mud at Party. That concludes my responsibilities this week.
Thank you, Russ.
I have family support tomorrow afternoon. On Friday morning, Shirley and I are going to Sacramento for the sale of our COPs. We're not going.
I don't know the new date, but you should check with her.
Oh, okay. And then I'll be going to Lassen County with the sheriff's office to look at their jail and their juvie facility, which I don't happen to like. And all of you know how I feel about addendums, including today. In 2006, we had not the number of addendums, but the number of meetings. We had 14 meetings that had addendums. This year, including today, we've had 30 meetings with addendums. I think that's really inappropriate. I don't think it's fair to the board, and it's fair to the public, but then that's redundant.
That's it?
That's it.
You got call tomorrow?
Oh, thank you. And then tomorrow night, Bill and I will be at the COG. Thanks.
I'll be at the COG tomorrow night. And, of course, I'll be at the barbecue. And am I attending, you mentioned the...
Yes, I'm hoping you might, as the backup on the Upper McCollum Watershed Association. They are meeting at 10 in the morning at Pardee, and I've got the agenda here for you. It's quite likely that I'll be out of town that day.
Okay, I will be there. That's it.
Tonight I have a CHIPS board meeting. Tomorrow I have the JPA for family support at CalWorks. On Thursday, I'm going to the county-sponsored prevent harassment training, and on Friday I will be deferring to you to carry on the water work. And Monday, guess we're confirmed to meet with the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
That's my understanding.
And I'll be collecting the bets if it happens.
Holding my breath.
Okay, Tom?
A couple items for the board, and I don't know if we discussed this or not, but we received a letter from the Calaveras County Water District on their groundwater management plan, and they're asking that Brian Moss, our environmental health director, help coordinate the effort, and that he would attend the public meetings, and that the county will partner with CCWD on this upcoming grant application. It's a grant application that's doing this work to seek funding for improved groundwater management activities, basically in the lower end of the county. So I just thought I'd bring that up and see if the board has any problems with Brian doing that. I would hope not.
No, I would support that
Okay,
wholeheartedly.
so somebody needs to communicate to Brian that we would like him to do that. Okay.
Brian, you've been communicated with. You're welcome.
Oh, I didn't see Brian back there. Okay. The second issue is we still have some Prop 40 money that came because we did not use Prop 40 money, which is some rec money for the gymnasium at the Mark Twain Grammar School. And I was speaking to Tony Tyrell this morning, and he had brought up earlier, and we had discussed earlier, that perhaps we could allocate that money to the sports complex at the Bret Harte High School. And we need to get that on the agenda to do that. Is there any board member that has a problem with that allocation?
That's your district's allocation, Tom. You don't need our approval.
Would you bring the Prop 40 back? And
You just want the unused funds to go to the high school project.
the Bret Harte High School project. If you have any questions about how to word that,
Talk to Mike.
yeah, Mike or Tony. But we've already done a bunch, so I think it just follows under the same, but we need to get it allocated. That completes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks. Brent?
I will not be here next Tuesday. This is one of the two sessions I indicated in the time I'm here. I have a pre-planned trip. I will be going to the annual conference of the CIOs, which is a good recruiting venue, if you will, and then I have an out-of-state wedding as a follow-up. So I will be back here on Tuesday of next week. Tuesday of the following week. Monday, I do have my first department head meeting. All the department heads and elected officials and I will be getting together in the morning. One of the items I did, I've only been here back 6 days, so I have all wisdom. I know what's going on. I believe that in your nets. But one of the items I do have on is about the agenda review process, and what I'm told by many is many late deposits of packets, sometimes several inches thick, and so I'm going to be reemphasizing the rules that are already in existence and been in existence really for 20 years at least, of deadlines and meeting those deadlines. And the second part is on the addendum. I have no idea what the experience has been on addendums, but certainly I've heard from others, oh, here's another addendum. So as Marita said, unless you tell me otherwise, I'll be talking about a somewhat greater screening of addendums for true emergency aspect. And that's not passing judgment on anything that's gone on. It's just, I think it's, if you get into a rhythm of thinking you can do addendums, then addendums occur. If you get into the rhythm of not doing them, then they won't occur. And I will also be scheduling a session with the board to come back and talk to you, maybe a little bit of my observations, but more likely in the realm of what do you want me to work on. I've already got a nice list, and some of you have individually talked. I think it might be worthwhile to have a little discussion about where you want me to focus my energies. Certainly at the top of that is the recruitment process, and the brochures are now going out on that, and it's on its merry way. So I'll talk to you more about other items. Some of which I should say prelude is there's obviously some things that are of a closed door session that I won't be discussing at that study session, and we can figure out how to discuss those, dealing with personnel and real estate and those kind of things.
I did have one question that you raised. We had previously, I thought, we're going to review the job description and minimum qualifications for the new CAO, and I'm not sure that came down, or at least we've seen anything in relation to that. I know postings are already out, so it may be after the fact, but I was hoping that we'd have a chance to talk about that. And in open session or whatever, but it seems to me we have some follow-up on that.
and then we could talk about that. I've gone on, as I've discussed with somebody, it is what it is, that you have certain things in place, and barring you wanting to have a period of time to delay the recruitment, I've proceeded on that. That does not prevent you from at some point, and you may even, as part of the discussions of during interviews, may want to talk with people also. But at least at this point, what you have in place is actually unchanged from 1990.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and it's that conversation I was hoping to have before we begin interviews in order for us to have clarity as to what it is we're trying to do here.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brent. James?
This board, as the Board of Equalization, has a matter that's under submission. You need to go into deliberation. I wanted to find out in the next couple of Tuesdays if you'd all be here, so I can pick it up.
I should be here.
We have a family health situation that makes it very difficult to determine exactly when I'll be leaving, but within the next couple of weeks, that's a for sure. And I'll try to be here every Tuesday, but can't guarantee it.
Thanks. I'll try to give you all.
Jim, wasn't that issue basically just strictly a matter of law? There wasn't really a valuation issue as much as a matter of law, and once the matter of law is resolved, then the issue is resolved.
It was primarily a question of law, but I think there were some factual issues that needed to be decided as well. And that's all. I have a document that you need to sign in my office, Bill, before you leave.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Carol? Okay. Okay, at this time, folks, I'm going to take a very short recess. We're going to come back in for our study session regards the grading ordinance. Okay? 5 minutes.